Reborn as the Viking Pirate King. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 401, Judgment of Heretics, 3. Witness, what's your name? The first witness called was a gaunt young man with a pale face, even staggering as he walked. As he took his place, he glanced back at Loki, his eyes filled with fear. Your Honor, my name is Manuel Grey Rain. I'm the flower farmer responsible for cultivating White Cloud Night in White Cloud Canyon. The witness turned, pointing behind him, toward Loki. I can prove it's him who colluded with the evil god, transforming so many of our compatriots into those horrific fish-like monsters. Rumors have long circulated in Normandy. The Duke of Normandy is not a subject of Odin. He's a follower of an evil god of unknown origin. With these words, the audience erupted in discussion. Ethan banged the gavel again, and when the audience fell silent, he turned to Loki. Is what the witness said true? Are you really not a follower of Odin? Loki chuckled dryly and admitted generously, I'm not, by the Lord, a follower of an evil god actually ruled over Odin's people. I wonder if that god King Odin will thank me when I die? Ethan smiled at Loki. He loved his prey falling into his trap. The entire interrogation proceeded perfectly according to his predefined script. He thoroughly enjoyed this feeling of being in control. Only the still calm Viking Duke and the silent Viking warriors standing behind him made him feel a slight sense of unease. Why didn't these Vikings react at all when they heard he wasn't a follower of Odin? Could it be that they already knew this secret? God King Odin will thank you. Loki looked back at Ethan fearlessly. Perhaps he'll take you to Valhalla today. The eerie smile on Loki's face gave him a chill. With a cold snort, he ordered the second witness to be summoned. My lord, on the morning of April 12th, I personally witnessed 12 French mercenaries die under Duke Loki's axe. He slaughtered them like dogs, but this bloodthirsty demon wasn't satisfied. Just 1 hour later, he summoned an army of over 1,000 men, roaring that they would charge into Yun province and slaughter all the people of France and England. God King Odin hasn't seen enough. If I remember correctly, this demon roared these very words as he passed by the gate of my farm. Ethan was about to speak when Loki interrupted him. Hey, old man, that Frenchman just said I turned the French people into strange fish, and now you're saying I led the army to kill them. So, this evil god of mine first turned them into monsters, and then led the army to kill these strange fish. I've had a very tiring morning on April 12th. Boom, boom, boom. Sensing something was amiss, Judge Ethan banged his gavel again. The prisoner has no right to speak with witnesses. If you do it again, I will deem you a contempt of justice. Your guilt or innocence will be determined by the jury. If I were you, I would keep my mouth shut and avoid any unnecessary lashings. With a smile and a nod, Loki retreated to his seat. Then, the English actor delivered a moving performance. Throughout his accusation, he seemed to transform into a ghost, following Loki throughout the entire process. He saw them draw their swords and kill, and saw him stab André Jarvin to death with a single blow. Perhaps because he'd memorized the lines so thoroughly, he completely forgot the first French flower farmer's accusation of Loki as an evil god. Faced with this farcical, incoherent trial, Loki couldn't do anything but smile. The ignorant masses of the Middle Ages had never seen television, never listened to the radio, and even popular literature barely existed. Their minds possessed a very limited understanding of logical thinking. They could easily find a pretext to accuse someone of something. After a long and agonizing period, the English farmer finally withdrew. Uninformed by television, movies, or popular literature, a significant number of medieval citizens actually believed his story and cast angry glances at Loki. In this strange atmosphere, a third witness entered. While the first two pre-planned witnesses from the French merely elicited a smile, the third involuntarily forced it to retreat. He saw someone he knew. Bloodhound Wayne, Loki muttered, eyes wide. Rubbing his eyes vigorously, he glanced at Wenzoff behind him, only to find the steward, likewise, looking bewildered. The Viking pirate who troubled Loki the most in Hanshu village was none other than Bloody Hand Wayne. In later times, he was described as a psychopath with a chronic tendency towards self-destruction. But in the Dark Ages, they were known as fanatics. They considered themselves the gods' most loyal servants. Bloody Hand Wayne was one such individual. He stubbornly believed that Odin had sent him down to earth solely to witness spectacular slaughter. Consequently, he slaughtered without restraint, needing no reason or purpose. Perhaps he had just entered an inn and spotted a heavily armored swordsman. He would quietly approach and slash their throat with a single blow. Everyone thought his pathologically indiscriminate killing unworthy of heroism. Only he firmly believed that the gods of Valhalla simply enjoyed watching him. Sooner or later, they would recognize his hard work and elevate him to the status of chosen one. Honestly, Bloody Hand Wayne did a favor to Coldwater Village during the lifetime of Loki's biological father, Meg's Starlag. When the village was impoverished and most struggled to afford even 2 meals a day, this unscrupulous, bloodthirsty pirate plundered the village through robbery and a relentless, aimless slaughter. Wayne wasn't greedy for money. He enjoyed the act of killing far more than the amount of loot he plundered from the corpses. This was perhaps his only redeeming quality. Many impoverished women and orphan children survived thanks to his unrestrained slaughter. Yet, this fanatical follower of Odin possessed an incredibly tenacious vitality. Years of relentless warfare had decimated the vast majority of the village. While his companions perished one by one, Bloody Hand Wayne miraculously managed to survive. This reinforced his belief that the gods of Asgard were appreciating his performance. They simply couldn't bear to capture him and bring him back to Valhalla. Chapter 402, Judgment of Heretics, 4. Before invading the English Isles, Blood Hand Wayne would slaughter several Vikings from neighboring provinces, or sneak into Blood Dove and Foggy Duck under dark and windy conditions to slaughter pirates whose hands were also stained with blood. In later times, this random killing would be called a serial killer, although Loki couldn't understand it. In Scandinavia, thieves robbing each other was commonplace. If two families must starve to death, it would be better for one to take up an axe and slaughter the other. This way, the wealth of both families would be combined, and at least one family could survive the harsh winter. No family raised in the barren frozen land could claim to have never murdered a fellow resident. Even Loki's father, Mangs, in his youth, stole the spoils of other villages more than once. This was how the people of Hanshu village managed to survive the bitter winters in Scandinavia. Darwinian laws govern everything. Murder was not an unforgivable sin. However, when he conquered 2 provinces in the English Isles, suddenly adding 100,000 English farmers to the population, a murderous demon like Blood Hand Wayne could no longer live under Loki's command. Loki gifted all the Vikings who followed him on his expeditions with fiefdoms, ships, and vast tracts of farmland. Only Wayne, over 50 years old, was given a heavy purse and sent away from his province, returning to Scandinavia to survive. He still remembered Wayne's look. He looked at him in confusion. However, Loki knew that the 2 newly conquered provinces were filled with terrified English farmers. He had to eliminate any potential sources of unrest. Among them, Blood Hand Wayne, who delighted in killing, was the most dangerous. Wayne's lifelong pursuit was not gold. Loki knew this well. But now, apart from giving him more gold than he could spend, he had no other way to satisfy his demands. While everyone else was enjoying the fruits of victory, he, alone, was banished, clutching a bag of gold coins. Duke Loki, may I ask, is this elderly Viking one of your subordinates? For the first time since entering the courtroom, Loki lowered his head. After a pause, he replied gravely, yes, Wayne wasn't a saint's subordinate, but he had, after all, rendered meritorious service to Hanshu village. Loki couldn't deny his existence. Viking Wayne, may I ask you, did you participate in the massacre of my French civilians on April 12? Ethan asked gravely in Viking, the courtroom falling silent. Was this massacre carried out under the order of Duke Loki? The translator whispered Ethan's words into Viking. After hearing them, Wayne lifted his long gray hair and let out 2 sinister laughs. Do you need instructions for killing people? I came before you to wield my axe and offer blood and broken bones to the god King Odin. It's him. Wayne pointed at Loki. This Duke Loki has betrayed our faith. Just because he's willing to turn around and lick the boots of those soft, weak English sissies doesn't mean I have to accept his orders. That French merchant is just a first. Given the chance, I'll crush you all to death, grind you into gore foam, and boil you into bloody porridge, offering it to my great god king. Ha ha ha. The court fell silent, and Wayne's unhinged laughter echoed clearly in everyone's ears. Hearing these words, Loki immediately understood Ethan's actions. All medieval inhabitants were simple-minded and easily incited. Bloody Hand Wayne must not have settled down in Scandinavia after receiving the gold. He must have wandered to the Duchy of France, continuing his attempts to kill for fun. However, there, he was captured. Vikings never lied. They made no secret of their murders. The more people gathered, the more they boasted about their slayings. Wayne did the same thing in court. He had indeed killed someone, but it wasn't necessarily André Jarvin. Ethan's French speech was incomprehensible. By the time the translator whispered it to him, it must have taken on a different meaning. Ethan's sole purpose in allowing this suspect to testify as a witness was to spread fear. The majority of the jury were legitimate citizens who had lived their entire lives in Paris. Their knowledge of the Vikings came primarily from the minstrels who sang in bars and on the stage, praising the loyalty and bravery of the Varia guards. Ethan had to instill in the jury, who had never seen a Viking before, a deep fear of these unscrupulous murderers. He had to convince the two Plantagenets around him to support his decision to try a heretic. That was the rule of the Inquisition. Brother Wayne, Loki looked at him, his eyes filled with sorrow. I admit, I've let you down. I shouldn't have stuffed a bag of gold into your hand and sent you packing like a stray dog. If we can escape France unscathed this time, I'll do everything I can to ensure you have a home in a normal old age, just like the rest of your comrades. Bah. Bloodhand Wayne glared at him with dark red eyes and spat mercilessly. The two men had a deep-seated ideological conflict. In Wayne's eyes, their only mission was to serve the god King Odin and endlessly slaughter the gods of Asgard. In his eyes, Vikings should live in the barren Scandinavian peninsula, relying on slaughter year-round. They shouldn't, like Loki, grant his people fiefs, keep their people satiated in castles, and do everything in their power to avoid war. Seeing his goal of intimidating the Parisians had been achieved, Loki lost the arrogance he had displayed upon entering the courtroom. Ethan waved his hand with satisfaction, directing the acolytes of torture to lead Wayne away. So far, everything was proceeding according to his predetermined plan. Using this unexpected appearance of his old subordinate, he had successfully broken through Loki's defenses. Now all he needed to do was deliver the killing blow. Call the next witness. The courtroom doors opened again, and Loki turned back. This time, however, he gasped. The person before him was someone he had never expected. Chapter 403, Judgment of Heretics, 5. Ulysses Ella was a unique monarch on this continent. Unlike the heroes sung by bards and tavern attendants, he believed more in the power of Loki and forbearance. An action that appears to have failed may not necessarily be a complete defeat. Similarly, a seemingly victorious victory may not necessarily be a victory if one takes a long-term view. A nightmarish childhood experience instilled in Ella a deep reverence for life. At the age of 6, he witnessed his mother's death in childbirth. In the Middle Ages, when medical care was generally poor, it was not uncommon for women to die in childbirth. His warlike father quickly forgot the incident, but Ulysses remembered the nightmare deeply. From that day on, he knew the records in the holy episcopal scriptures were true. Every life that comes to peace is a gift from the Holy Lord Christ to mankind. Even as he grew older, the haunting image of his childhood remained etched in his memory. From the moment he became crown prince, he began to examine his kingdom with a keen eye. After carefully comparing his accounts, Ulysses discovered that using gold coins to avoid conflict was far more cost-effective than wielding a sword and engaging in battle. Every life on the battlefield, from a hungry infant to someone capable of working in the fields, and then to someone capable of wielding a sword, required a tremendous investment of time and money from the kingdom. The difference between a death and the loss of property was not significant. In Ulysses's eyes, waging a war solely for land and war reparations was a sheer loss. Money was easy to come by. But raising a soldier from infancy to adulthood required 18 years. This lost time could never be recovered. Based on this life philosophy, when the kingdom of Mercia fell to Ulysses, he immediately became a coward, a despised figure. He would never split if he could form an alliance. He would never attack if he could defend. He would never resort to war if he could pay reparations. The 7 kingdoms of the English Isles immediately recognized a rising coward, and the nickname Ella the Honest firmly stuck with Ulysses. But he remained unfazed. 20 years later, the rulers of the 7 kingdoms had changed, yet Ulysses remained on the throne, subservient and submissive. 40 years later, the ruling families of the 7 kingdoms had even changed. Year after year, Ulysses brought gifts and blessings to the new monarchs. Meanwhile, the kingdom of Mercia, after 40 years of diligent management, had seen its territory not shrink at all but increase by 20%. This was land completely devastated by years of war. Ulysses calmly acquired it, then utilized his vast population to cultivate and transform the scorched earth into fertile fields. Internally, he vigorously developed basic industries, making Mercian shipping the strongest of the 7 kingdoms. Externally, he vigorously promoted trade, exchanging goods and services with as many nations as possible. His business philosophy was sound. 40 years of political experience taught him that avoiding war and maintaining low-key development was the path for a ruler. Being scolded was nothing. They simply dared to claim weakness. Mercia hadn't faced a true invasion in years. The dragon-slaying ballistae densely planted on every city wall were a testament to the kingdom's strength. Unfortunately, mortal life is never smooth sailing. 2 years ago, Hummel blood pigeon crossed the North Sea. A year ago, Loki and his Viking raiders suddenly appeared on Mercian soil. This officially marked the end of Mercia's peaceful life. Ulysses hadn't personally served on the front lines for a long time. Faced with Loki, he could only fully cooperate, acquiescing to his every request. Loki offered him a hostage, and he dutifully obeyed. Loki said they were allies, and he readily agreed. But did he truly believe this? Regarding this question, Loki naively believed that if he demonstrated his value as an ally and married Elizabeth, the old man would recognize his strength. Cooperation with the warlike Vikings would make the powerless kingdom of Mercia more stable and diverse. However, now, as Ulysses' ally appeared as the fourth witness, he reflected carefully and had to admit that everything his father-in-law had done seemed to be coercion. He had hidden his fear deeply, concealing it behind a wise smile that was almost always present. It wasn't until the Duchy of France set its sights on him that he finally erupted. "I am Ulysses Allah, Lord of the Kingdom of Mercia. Today, standing in the halls of the Inquisition, before the 12 angels of the Holy Lord Christ, I swear that everything I say is true." Loki looked at the old man, a mixture of emotions. It's young people like Elizabeth who truly demonstrate strong resilience in the face of change. From extreme resistance to openness, the Mercian princess took less than 2 months. She witnessed firsthand the changes in the lives of the people of this land. And no matter the era, the elderly are the most difficult to change. When faced with adversity, they use the experience gained from a lifetime of hardship to compromise with reality, but their hearts remain as solid as a rock. Based on my interactions with this Duke Loki, he once told me clearly that he was a finder who came from the turbulence of time and space. 30 years ago, the Byzantine king Michael I once announced to the world that finders were the most dangerous enemies in the world. They descended to this plane like alien gods, but the history stored in their brains was indeed written for us by unknown secret beings. Ever since this man descended into the Viking tribe, the Viking tribe has ushered in a disaster of extinction. In just 3 years, a large number of Vikings went to the battlefield. The already bloodthirsty tribe was led by a madman named Lost Man and was on the verge of losing control. If we don't do something, the 7 countries of the English Isles, together with the Vikings and the entire Slavic territory, will all be turned into paradise for breeding demons. Build a huge empire covering the Scandinavian peninsula, the English Isles, and the Slavic region. This is the real goal of this madman. In front of Loki, he was submissive and obeyed all his requests. Ulysses had been patient until now, waiting for Loki to stand before the French for trial. Believing he would inevitably die here, he came forward to make his accusation. He accused the time traveler of spreading the flames of war throughout Mercia. He also accused him of plundering the land of the Mercian people and taking his only daughter. The buzz of discussion rose again. Judge Ethan looked at Loki with a pair of sharp eyes. Only now did he finally understand why the suzerain had mobilized the full force of France against this man. This man was truly extremely dangerous. Enough, Loki shook his head and said softly. That's enough, father-in-law. Chapter 404, Judgment of Heretics, 6. Loki's identity as a time traveler was his biggest secret. But upon closer inspection, he'd already revealed numerous flaws. A Viking born and raised in Scandinavia could speak fluent English, untrained, and seamlessly communicate in Tang Chinese with the proud Tang people. This simply defied common sense. Not to mention an 8-year-old child drawing blueprints that didn't exist in this world, spending his days studying shipbuilding techniques. The passing of a member of the fire transmitter gang in Hanshu village was valuable information, potentially worth a fortune. Last spring, at Wonghei Fortress, this secret was revealed by Ulysses. Loki neither admitted nor denied it. Unexpectedly, The old man would now use it as a weapon to bring him down in the Inquisition. He didn't harbor much hatred for his father-in-law. On the contrary, he felt a certain respect for this patient old man. He truly embodied the principle of flexibility, despite Loki's utmost efforts to benefit the world, to Ulysses' Elam, and to all the people of England. He remained an invader. The king of Mercia had accused him of plundering territory, seizing the princess, and murdering his subjects. He could not escape any of these charges. "Your Honor, I plead guilty." As Loki uttered these words, the boisterous court fell silent again. Not only the onlookers and Chief Justice Ethan, but even Ulysses Elam, who had not yet left, cast puzzled glances at him. No one in the room knew Loki better than him. His son-in-law was not one to give up easily. To drive these Viking demons from English territory, Ulysses had even prepared himself for death in Paris. He had secretly calculated everything. He had never expected Loki to say the word "plead guilty." "Defendant Duke Loki Starlag, do you want to admit the crime you committed against my French noble André Jarvan?" "No, I haven't done it yet. I want to plead guilty to a crime more serious than this accusation. My crime is that I was born in the impoverished Scandinavian peninsula. According to the wishes of you gentlemen, we Vikings deserve to starve to death and freeze to death in this cold and impoverished land. In order to maintain your dignity, we must hide on the edge of the world, sell the lives of our people to serve as your bodyguards, and be a servant forever and ever. Your Honor, do you know what the most ridiculous thing is? The ridiculous thing is that I actually tried to be more civilized. I restrained my subordinates and asked them to kill as little as possible. In order to enter the civilized world, I even dug up dragon bones. Trying to please you with rare goods and adapt to the business rules you set." With a muffled thud, Loki kicked open the heavy coffin lid, revealing the corpse of the dead evil god within. "For this trial, I even brought the corpse of the Deep One, attempting to argue that I wasn't the one who brought down these evil gods that plague the land. I, like you, have taken up arms and bravely fought these monstrous creatures that harm the world. It's no use, it's absolutely useless." He pointed a finger at everyone. "Today, you civilized people in this civilized society have made me realize something. From the beginning to the end, you have never treated us as equals. Your talk of fairness and justice is all just bullshit. If I just sit at the poker table according to your rules, I'll never win. Because you've ingrained in me the belief that people like us are born losers. Since then, I have no more credence." Waving behind him, Alfred handed over the squirming sack. Loki untied the bag and pulled out a bloody figure. "Who is this?" the onlookers murmured. They were not far from Loki, but the man's face was too horrific to be clearly seen. "Look at the clothes. A light, plain gauze dress. This must be expensive. This is a noble," the audience murmured, and Ethan, sitting in the upper seat, couldn't help but narrow his eyes. In all his years of trying heretics, he had only seen prisoners collapse and cry in fear in court, but never saw someone trying to commit a crime in court, fearing that their charges were not long enough. I am Baron André Jarvan." With these two words, the onlookers erupted in uproar again. Ethan tried to calm the situation, but diamond-flowered Duran, sitting to his left, trembling and rising to his feet. Although the man's face was covered in blood, his familiar features and voice were surprisingly similar to André's. How did he end up in Loki's hands? After the failed attempt to capture Alfred, didn't he escape with his sovereign? Loki grabbed him by the hair and turned his face to face the audience. "Tell them, in front of all the men of Paris, what crime you've committed." Loki's right hand clamped down on his neck, a murderous aura radiating from his iron-cold grip. André knew he was facing a volcano about to erupt. If he didn't want to die immediately, he had no choice but to cooperate. "I colluded with the evil god and murdered the residents of Yun province, and what else? I joined the Illuminati and betrayed my faith." Grasping André's neck with one hand, he lifted him up like a chicken and turned his miserable face to Judge Ethan. "Your Honor, we are standing in the Inquisition and have brought you the biggest heretic in Paris. He confessed to all his crimes. But Mr. André, I ask you not to forget, I am the Viking Duke of Normandy. You colluded with the evil god and killed French workers and English farmers in the Cloud province. All of this has nothing to do with me, but you arbitrarily beat the only daughter of my minister, sent warriors to chase her all the way into my territory, and then shot her uterus with a bow and arrow, making her lose her fertility forever. I hereby sentence you to death." After speaking, Loki stretched out his hands and tightly grasped André's head. The French baron let out an unbearable sharp roar, but Loki remained indifferent. He mechanically tightened his grip, feeling the bones within the skull shattering. 3 seconds later, The entire skull exploded with a thud, like a crushed watermelon. Flesh, brain matter, and bone fragments splattered all over Loki, making him look like a demon crawling out of a pool of blood. Ruthlessly wiping the blood from his face, Loki opened his bloodshot eyes and stared at Judge Ethan von Crane, who was stunned. "Now, I am the murderer of Baron Andre Jarvan. I plead guilty. Great men from the civilized world, cleanse me of my sins." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405, Judgment of Heretics, 7. The bloody scene unfolding before his eyes was beyond anyone's comprehension. A murder suspect, having brought the deceased he was suspected of killing, did not attempt to exonerate himself, but instead crushed him before the judge's eyes. What kind of maneuver was this? Before entering the Inquisition, Ethan knew this Viking duke might be difficult to deal with today. But even in his wildest dreams, he could never have imagined such a thing happening. How dare someone in the Western continent defy divine authority so utterly? In the Inquisition, only the acolytes of torture had ever lashed out. No heretic had ever dared to act so lawless as Loki. The sudden eruption of thick blood within the courtroom completely stunned him. His mind was in a state of paralysis, and his only thought was to protect the descendants of the Plantagenet family to his right. The two delicate princes and princesses were stunned. France's reputation and glory could be put aside for now. The Viking demon who had murdered in public must be subdued first. Ethan secretly signaled the acolytes of torture to take control. 30 chosen ones from the warpath gathered, thorn flails in hand. However, Loki had been prepared for this. He pulled up the withered corpse of the Deep One, unsheathed the broadsword and axe hidden beneath the body, and tossed them behind him to Alfred and Wenzoff. "Surrendering without a fight has never been my style. If you want to fight, then so be it." With that, he swung his axe backhand, severing the two acolytes of torture who had attempted to approach him. A shower of crimson blood filled the court, officially signaling the start of a massacre. Alfred gripped his broadsword tightly, his psychic energy flowing. The divine might of the hurricane berserker gathered in his hands. He unleashed 2 whirlwinds, temporarily halting the acolytes of torture. Then, with a leap, he leaped before Grand Inquisitor Ethan von Klon. Ethan had never encountered anything like this in the Inquisition. Before he could even utter a cry, the cold silver broadsword had plunged into his chest. With a soft thud, the soul breaker, absorbing psychic energy, ignited with silver flames. Alfred unhesitatingly drew the broadsword, instantly blasting a charred, bloody hole in Ethan's chest. Chief Justice Ethan was dead. Amidst a hail of blood, Alfred descended from the sky, wielding a flaming sword. The soul breaker easily pierced the soft skull of Durand Thornus on the other side. The intense silver flames instantly solidified his soft brain into a dark red slurry. Capture the leader first. Within 10 seconds of the battle, Alfred, riding the wind, had slain all the important figures within the courtroom who issued the orders. On the other side of the battlefield, most of the 30 torture acolytes had perished under Loki's axe. The thorn chain was a weapon that could inflict the greatest possible pain during the interrogation of unarmed prisoners. But in a one-on-one battle with a steel axe, the wooden chainmail was completely useless. Close the door, hurry, block the door. The first to react to what was happening were the French mercenaries in the audience. Faced with this sudden change, their first thought wasn't to escape or call for help, but to close the door and isolate Landbixo and the Golden Scale guards from the courtroom. The mercenaries breathed in a hard-earned, bloody scent with a heavy, greedy breath. This was the smell of opportunity. There were only 3 armed Vikings in the courtroom, but nearly 100 mercenaries had arrived. Don't forget, even though the judge and the Chamber of Commerce president were dead, the prince and princess of the Plantagenet family remained seated. Capturing these 3 lawless Vikings alive would be a huge opportunity to shine. The mercenaries were even dreaming of promotions, castles, lands, and even an audience with the emperor. How could such a once-in-a-century, heaven-sent opportunity be passed up to the Golden Scale guards, who had rendered countless service? Brothers, for the honor of France, capture these 3 heretics alive. We must offer them to Edward Longshanks, cross them, and burn them, surround them, don't harm their lives. Capture them alive, A series of resounding clashes of swords echoed as the mercenaries, oblivious to the screaming jury members and the trembling residents, surrounded Loki and his companions, weapons in hand, in a pool of blood. However, barely had the encirclement formed when the mercenaries in the rear joined the fleeing group. The reason was simple: their fragile ornamental rapiers were no match for the furious axe's blows. In the briefest of exchanges, the 3 centurions charging in the front were chopped into 6 even pieces. Loki spun, smoothly severing his 5 long legs, sending his 2 heads soaring high into the air. The sharp broadaxe mercilessly sliced through everything in its path, leaving the courtroom stained with blood, a bloody hell. But this was only the beginning of the slaughter. As the mercenaries fell, the Vikings waiting at the back of the courtroom, accompanying Loki, began to acquire weapons. Hey, I never thought these idiots would actually close the door on us, then why should we be so polite? In stark contrast to the panicked French spectators, Loki's Vikings calmly fished their weapons from the pool of blood and casually dispatched the fleeing French nobles. Those with rapiers wielded them with desperate blows, while those without weapons found no difficulty in the situation. They casually plucked a severed leg or arm from the floor, peeled away the flesh, and extracted the leg bone. The arm bone, in their hands, proved a reliable blunt weapon. Even when they come to court to watch the fun, these nobles have purses hanging from their bodies and gold chains around their necks. They're just a bunch of walking fat sheep. I've been staring at their purses all morning. Thank Odin for sending them to us. Thank Frey for giving me this perfect day. The decorative rapiers used by French swordsmen to practice their skills were not the usual weapons of the Vikings, but this did not prevent the Vikings from quickly mastering their use. Go, don't be afraid, we are many. The mercenary commander roared feebly, but a moment later, he found that his brave subordinates were squeezed into a bottomless meat grinder. What was even more terrifying was that a layer of deep red scarlet fog began to fill the court. In this dark fog, he couldn't see Loki's position, his subordinates, or even the sword in his hand. However, the Viking duke opposite was like a ghost. He ran flexibly in the red fog, and almost every time he swung the axe, the shrill red flash could take away a row of limbs. The stumps and broken arms of the nobles separated from their bodies involuntarily, and thick blood flowed out, making the already dark red blood mist become as black as ink. Boom boom boom. The golden scale guards pounded against the locked iron doors with all their might. However, these 2 gates, designed to prevent the escape of heretics from the courtroom, were incredibly strong. The mercenary commander, burying himself in the blood and flesh paste on the ground, crawled like a maggot, finally approaching the 2 iron doors he had personally ordered closed. With all his might, he pulled the bolts, and when the heavy doors finally swung open, the Tang Dynasty swordsman Lan Bixu, radiating emerald spiritual energy, finally soared into the courtroom, sword in hand. Chapter 406, Judgment of Heretics, 8. Lan Bixu's abilities were known throughout Paris. Ever since he assumed command of the Golden Scale Guard, no one, whether demigod or grand perfection, had ever been able to withstand a single blow from his sword. In the eyes of the Parisians, he had transcended the realm of deity, entering a whole new realm. And then, as the 2 heavy iron gates finally opened, a streak of emerald green light flew into the bloody mist. It was a slender flying sword, gleaming with a shimmering green light. From the pitch-black bloody mist, the sword trailed a long green tail. Dozens of Vikings, strung together by the light, fell in unison like straw slashed by a scythe, instantly dead. Loki's pupils suddenly narrowed. He realized that the newcomer was a powerful cultivator, no less powerful than Master King. Such a being was far beyond the Vikings' ability to defeat Alfred. Blow the horn, let's retreat. Loki still remembered the horror of being slaughtered by Master King a year ago. In Hanshu village, with nowhere to retreat, he nearly sacrificed the might of the village's 5 powerful chosen ones to barely defeat the nascent soul cultivator. Remember, Master King was alone in the defense of Hanshu village. But at this point, the Golden Scale Guards of Paris City included more than just Lan Bixu, a sword cultivator. The Plantagenet family must have been willing to spend a fortune hiring sword cultivators to maintain national stability. Loki could sense the powerful auras of several cultivators around the Golden Core stage, behind Lan Bixu's powerful psychic energy. Slaughtering a few chosen ones was easy for the Vikings, but a head-on confrontation with 7 or 8 Tang Dynasty sword cultivators was tantamount to suicide. Wiping the blood from his cheek, Loki wielded his axe, carving a bloody path. However, he wasn't heading for the gate, but towards the fallen body of Chief Justice Ethan. At the very beginning of the battle, Alfred had already killed him and diamond-flowered Duran with a single blow. Without the judge's command, the court immediately fell into chaos. But don't forget, to Ethan's left, the two Plantagenet princes and princesses remained frozen in place. Reaching out with a mighty hand, Loki grasped the young prince's neck. He immediately turned, and just as the flying sword was about to pierce his head, he thrust a French prince in front of him. The emerald green sword, piercing the air, hovered in midair, landing firmly on the forehead of the French prince Francesco. "Hey, my lord commander, if you don't want this poor prince to die at my hands, please clear a path. My hands are sore after all that slaughter. Don't force me to accidentally break the prince's delicate neck." The gate swung open, and the blood mist dissipated. A scene of hell appeared before the golden scale guards. Judge, jury, audience, torture monks, and nearly everyone else perished in the slaughter that lasted only a few minutes. The blood that pooled in the center of the courtroom flowed out of the hall, down the white marble steps and into the church square, drawing gasps from the onlookers. A dozen towering figures, blood-soaked, stood silently amidst them. Leading them were Loki, who had his hand lodged in the prince's neck, and Venzoff, who had a sharp knife across the princess's artery. Behind them stood Alfred, who had knocked Ulysses Ally unconscious and carried him on his shoulders. "Master Commander, do not question my resolve. I once said that this judge, beloved by Odin, would rule in Valhalla today. And I have done it. If I said I would strangle this prince, I would do it." With that, he pressed his fingers hard, their hard fingers piercing the tender skin, causing 2 lines of blood to flow down the snow-white skin. Surprisingly, the French prince made no sound. Even with several bloody scratches on his neck, he remained as stiff as a block of wood. He didn't resist. He showed no expression. Even his sister beside him showed no sign of panic. What's going on? Despite the prince's strange reaction, Lan Bixu, floating in midair, still halted his attack. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the lawless Viking duke. What happened today in the Inquisition was the biggest stain on his reign. He had never imagined anyone would dare challenge his authority like Loki. The boundless rage within him had nearly driven him completely mad. He's just a prince. His priority is completely different from Loki's. If I kill him, the worst that can happen is I'll lose a few ranks. My position in the Duchy of France is unmatched. With the Overlord's protection, I'll be able to. Another muffled groan interrupted his thoughts. This time it came from Princess Golinda. Wenzoff had already brought a cold blade to her cheek. With one powerful stroke, the 12-year-old princess's delicate face would be gone forever. "Don't push me," Loki said gravely. "At worst, we'll all perish together. After all, I've already killed so many French nobles today, and brought the 2 Plantagenet children to Valhalla. I can continue to torture them after my death. I won't be lonely on the road to the underworld." The situation had gradually become clearer from the initial chaos of murderous rage. Frankly, he, Alfred, and Wenzoff were no match for Lan Bixu. The image of Master King slicing off his body with a single wave of his hand a year ago was still vividly etched in his mind. If he hadn't faced the dozens of chosen ones of Hanshu village alone, even with just one more giant and stage sword cultivator by his side, the entire village of Hanshu would have perished that bloody night. Meanwhile, Lan Bixu's cultivation was no less powerful than King's. But there were 8 sword cultivators following Lan Bixu. After activating the bloodline of his ancestors, the fundamental qualities of this body were indeed formidable, but it was undeniably still human flesh and blood. A few strikes would have left him bleeding and dead. The Tang Kingdom's sword cultivators were the strongest warriors in the land of Jiaxiao. A head-on confrontation with them was unwise. Now, their only hope of escape was to use the 2 royal family members in their hands. Loki was taking a gamble. He was betting that this powerful sword cultivator wouldn't dare disregard the lives of the Goldbroom clan in front of all the Golden Scale Guards. Lan Bixu secretly glanced at the neatly arranged rows of Golden Scale Guards behind him. At this moment, he was eager to take a gamble. He had complete confidence in his flying sword. He was confident he could pierce Loki's head before he could react. But that was just a gamble. If he actually injured this royal relative, he couldn't set a bad example in front of the Golden Scale Guards. "I've already got this duke in the pot, but there's no rush. It's foreseeable that he'll want to escape the city. Which is exactly what I want. There are too many buildings in the city that will restrict the use of flying swords, but if you go out of the city, in the open wilderness, these Viking pirates will all become my prey." Chapter 407 Escape 1. The citizens of Paris endured an unforgettable day. In that short span, they encountered martial law twice. The first time, the meticulously dressed Golden Scale Guards and their acolytes of torture escorted 3 Vikings to the Inquisition. Just 2 hours later, as smoke rose from the kitchens preparing lunch, the streets were blocked again. This time, thousands of stern-faced guards appeared. Unlike the orderly lines of the morning, they stood ready, swords drawn. Thousands of soldiers lined the streets, each one focused on the center. Their gazes were fixed on the same group of Vikings that had passed by earlier that morning. This time, they held 2 members of the royal family, draped in brocade robes and wearing golden crowns. "Master Loki, there's something wrong with these 2, Wenzoff whispered to Loki, ignoring the gazes from the Parisians. "Why do these 2 look so alike, so much like Miss Sophie?" A dozen survivors slowly marched through the streets of Paris. Loki, at the forefront, faced hundreds of French Golden Scale Guards, their weapons pointed at him. Hearing this, he paused involuntarily. Wenzoff was indeed a steward who knew every villager. A revelation, a wakeful thought. Loki once again gazed at the French prince in his arms. His distracted gaze truly resembled that of a young Sophie, still unaware of her true nature. Could there be some other secret hidden within the Plantagenet family? He pondered silently as he advanced. As for the citizens of Paris above them, today they witnessed something they had never seen before. They had actually seen with their own eyes the members of the Plantagenet family. "Holy Lord, I've lived for 75 years, and this is the first time I've seen our respected royal family appear on the streets of Paris. They truly are real. Haha, you old fool, are you getting all senile? How could the Plantagenets be fake? Without their stable rule, how could you have lived to be 75? Hey, little one, you must remember this day. If it weren't for these Vikings, I guarantee you'd never see a single Plantagenet in your life." The old man was right. In previous years, the most common sight for the people of Paris was the royal carriage. Emblazoned with the Plantagenet's iconic golden flowers, the actual royal family had never been seen. 100 years ago, the Carolingian dynasty, which had embodied the Carolingian Renaissance, was at its peak. However, within just 20 years, the Carolingian dynasty's descendants succumbed to illness. When the last remaining scion, Pierre Carolingian, succumbed to smallpox, rule of the kingdom fell to an obscure merchant family, the Plantagenets. It was said they enjoyed the support of the Merchants' Union and the majority of the dukes of France. However, the Plantagenets were a clan shrouded in mystery. To the citizens of Paris, they were far less interactive than the heirs of the Carolingian dynasty. They never publicly performed rituals or held any royal celebrations. Even when rulers changed, they didn't even change the reign title. But the people didn't care. They simply wanted a stable home, money in their pockets, and food on their table. As long as these were met, they cared little whether the ruler was human, ghost, fish, or beast. All the Golden Scale Guards followed Loki's lead, marching towards the gates of Paris. He held the Prince of France before him like a shield. Their flying swords were too fast and too sharp. They were the only weapon capable of stopping the sword cultivator's flying blades. "Citizens of Paris, please close your doors and windows, leave the streets, and return home. Do not open your windows without permission, or you will be harmed. The city is undergoing a joint defense training exercise with a Golden Scale Guard. Everything is under control." The sword cultivators suspended in mid-air channeled their psychic energy, shouting loudly across the street. Being held hostage by a group of Vikings was nothing. As long as the prince and princess were safely rescued, it wouldn't be a sin worth writing about. However, Landbixon knew that Diamond Flower Durand, president of the Paris Merchants' Union, had died in court. If this unrest damaged the reputation of Paris's businesses, the ultimate losers would be every household operating a business. The Golden Scale Guard would inevitably bear the brunt of the public's condemnation. As they slowly moved, the walls of Paris and its 2 massive gates came into view. Loki stealthily glanced up at the sky. He could sense Landbixon's presence not far above him. His 7 sword cultivators formed a massive circle in the air, enveloping him within it. It seems this day is destined to end badly. The flying swords controlled by the sword cultivators require an open area to perform complex maneuvers like acceleration and slewing. Paris's high population density prevented them from engaging in a killing spree within the city walls. But Loki knew. Once outside the city walls, even with a French prince as a shield, he would be unable to withstand such a large number of sword cultivators, attacking from all sides simultaneously. Before he could slay the prince, they would undoubtedly be able to pierce his joints with their flying swords. rendering him unable to exert any force. The bloodline of the ancestors was indeed much more powerful than that of mortals. But after all, they were not gods. At the gate, Loki paused, using the massive city gates overhead as a shield. He pulled Wenzoff and Alfred aside and gave his final instructions. This city gate is where we part, foster father, time is running out. Silence, listen to me first, we've come this far, and we can only get this far. Loki paused, reached into his bosom, and pulled out an exquisite box. It was a necklace handcrafted by the bone spirit craftsman SYNOPSIS. It was a gift Elizabeth wanted him to take back. He pressed the necklace into Alfred's palm. If we all push outside the city, in the open field, we will be powerless to resist the sword cultivators' flying blades. I know they're targeting me, so I won't leave this city. Alfred started to say something, but Wenzoff's large hand reached out to stop him. With every second counting, their team of over a dozen couldn't afford to be divided for a moment. They had to trust Duke Loki unconditionally at this moment. He always found a way out of desperate situations. After you leave the city, the most powerful nascent soul sword cultivator will no longer accompany you, but I anticipate that several golden core sword cultivators will still attempt to recapture the hostages. The battle you're about to face will not be easy. I'm not sure if you can safely reach the Normandy region. Don't worry, Your Excellency. Archbishop Francis seized the opportunity to speak. I've already contacted the Zoroastrians. They'll use their spies throughout the region to aid our escape. The English Channel isn't far from Paris as a straight line. As long as we can successfully enter the fortress of Versailles, they'll naturally assist us in our retreat. One type of people need no instruction, another type can be taught with words, and the third type can be taught with a staff. In the realm of escape, Archbishop Francis never left Loki with any concerns. Even without issuing any orders, the old archbishop diligently devised every possible means of survival. Alright, follow Francis and be sure to stay safe. Be careful of their flying swords. The divine power possessed by a giant and stage sword cultivator is still not something you can match. After giving all the instructions, Loki lowered his head in thought, carefully reviewing all his plans. Again, don't try to come back to save me. It will only slow me down. I must enter the palace and find Edward Longshanks, the King of France. If I don't explain this matter to him, we will always live under the shadow of France. Don't worry about me. I will definitely come back alive. Chapter 408 Escape 2. After explaining everything, Loki slammed the heavy iron door shut, then grasped the bolt with both hands. Unleashing the power of the ancestors, he swung the bolt, thick as an adult's arm, into a dramatic circle. This meant the city gates were temporarily closed, giving Alfred and Archbishop Francis a brief window to escape. Brothers, we've done nothing wrong. As much as I hate to admit it, I have to admit, these French bastards haven't done anything wrong either. The root of all this chaos lies entirely with the Illuminati, who are secretly manipulating everything. I started this, and I must end it. With that, Loki shook the hands of each of his old friends through the heavy steel door. Without further delay, he grabbed the French prince and leaped. This leap reached a height of 20 meters. With the French prince in his grasp, Loki flipped over and landed on the rooftops of the houses on the street. The unsuspecting swordsman instinctively followed him. Elsewhere, Wenzoff pulled Alfred up, and the others grabbed the horses of several merchants at the city gate, kicked them furiously, and sped off. The Golden Scale guards outside, having lost their leader, didn't know what to do. They mechanically grabbed their own horses and followed Wenzoff and his men. After all, the young French princess was still in his hands. Brothers who have already reached the outskirts of the city, continue pursuing the fugitives. Ensure Princess Golinda's safety. From the sky, Lan Bixum shouted orders. Su Si, Chang Fiu, leave the city to assist the Golden Scale guards. Everyone else, follow the bandit leader, Loki. Remember, Francisco, the man he holds, is the most important figure in the Plantagenet family. He is the fourth in line to the throne, and many nobles in the 21 provinces support his ascension to the throne. Maintaining the stability of imperial power is the responsibility of all of us. Golden Scale guards, march! The command roared out by the nascent soul cultivator, infused with spiritual energy, resonated through the heavens and earth. The Golden Scale guards obeyed in unison. All the guards imprisoned in the city turned around, not even attempting to reopen the gates. They rushed back into the city in unison, continuing their search for Loki. But only then did they realize the Viking Duke's formidable strength. His speed, strength, and physical prowess surpassed those of mortals. With a hostage in hand, He stepped onto the rooftops, soared into the sky, and fled like a ghost towards the palace. Although he couldn't fly, he could leap nearly 70 or 80 meters with a single leap. The Golden Scale Guards in the city, unable to ride horses and forced to pursue on foot, were quickly left behind. Only the sword cultivators, flying with their swords, could keep up. Lan Bixu led 5 of his men to pursue his fleeing form. But while pursuit was easy, bringing him down proved far more difficult. Flying with a sword was merely a means for sword cultivators to travel, not a survival skill. They could maintain speed by hovering in midair at breakneck speed, but Loki's erratic leaps, combined with the thrill of Parker in a bustling market, made keeping up with him and keeping him inside a challenge. Controlling his flying sword to injure someone was even more difficult. Lan Bixu's rage gradually built up, igniting. Initially, he had considered the lives of the pedestrians and the Prince of France. Whenever Loki's emerald sword was about to strike, he would either flee into crowded places like bars and shops, or hold up the prince as a shield. As the Grand Commander of the Golden Scale Guard, Lan Bixu could not kill in public. Therefore, whenever such a situation arose, he was forced to use his psychic energy to forcibly slow the sword's speed. However, as Loki inched closer to the city center, his surging rage made it increasingly difficult to control his murderous intent. This powerful swordsman, a defector from the Jade Mountain Sword sect, was no ordinary man. After repeated setbacks at Loki's hands, he began to swing his sword with abandon, completely oblivious to the chances of his sword piercing passers-by or inflicting wounds on the prince. Of course, another factor was the palace just beyond. If the prince or princess died at the hands of a thug, at most he would be held responsible for negligence. But if this person managed to break into the palace and disturb the King of France, the charges would be as heavy as a mountain. The Plantagenet family is an extremely private family. Only a handful of individuals are allowed daily access to the Grand Palais in Paris. Lan Bixu, having served as the leader of the Golden Scale Guard for many years, could only enter the palace to meet the Emperor on Christmas Day. On this single day of the year, he could enter the palace and see the Plantagenet princes and princesses. On weekdays, if he needed to report to the princes, he would have to wait a long time, much like envoys from other countries, for a chance to enter the palace. As for the Golden Scale Guard, they were never allowed to set foot inside. Rumor has it that the Grand Palais in Paris has its own independent guard structure. However, Lan Bixu had visited the palace over 10 times, yet he had never seen a single guard. The entire palace felt like a vast, illusory garden. Upon entering, the sweet, rich fragrance of flowers filled his nose and mouth, and everywhere he looked, he saw exquisitely arranged vases, bouquets, and scattered petals. From Lan Bixu's understanding of the Plantagenet family, he knew that almost no one in the family practiced martial arts or ascended to the level of the Chosen One. They couldn't possibly leave such a massive palace unguarded. The most likely scenario was that they'd invited an Eastern Continent illusionist from Guguzi's Zonghang school to create an array of meticulously arranged flower bouquets, transforming the entire palace into a vast magical formation. Just because other Western Continent nations couldn't hire Eastern Continent sorcerers didn't mean the wealthy Plantagenet family couldn't pull it off. Especially since Lan Bixu witnessed the royal family's wealth firsthand 3 years ago, he'd gained a clearer understanding of its opulence. Loki couldn't catch him. After several powerful leaps, he watched helplessly as he plunged into the walls of the Grand Palais. The powerful swordsman floating in mid-air could see the exquisite pavilions and terraces within the palace walls, as well as the vibrant bouquets of fresh flowers. "Commander, should we pursue them?" 5 swordsmen flew in at breakneck speed, hovering behind Lan Bixu. He gritted his teeth, gazing at the maze-like complex of the imperial courtyard below. Despite his anxiety, he dared not take a single step beyond the forbidden line. No one was allowed to enter the palace without permission, or else they would face the consequences. Lan Bixu believed the words "at your own risk" held true danger. To trespass without permission would be to fall into an illusion. If he couldn't find the center of the formation, he would inevitably be surrounded and killed by the alchemists using various methods within the illusion. Beyond the title of Grand Commander of the Golden Scale Guard, he was merely a runaway Tang swordsman. While the proud Tang people were reluctant to surrender to foreigners, there were always warriors willing to bow to gold for the right price. He didn't believe his status as a nascent soul swordsman alone would earn the Plantagenet family any leniency. Writing and posting every day is truly challenging. To improve readability, I've revised the chapters posted yesterday. Please forgive any inconsistencies. Chapter 409 Entering the Palace. Had the pursuer vanished? After scaling the palace wall, Loki discovered the 6 sword cultivators who had been pursuing him, now suspended in mid-air outside. The delicate, 3-meter-high wall acted like a transparent barrier, completely shielding everyone. Not only their bodies, but even their controlled flying swords dared not venture beyond the barrier. "Hey, Your Highness, why don't these bastards who've been chasing us all this way dare enter the palace?" Could there be guards even more formidable than them? The French prince, whom he had used as a shield, fending off at least 10 flying sword attacks, was now near death. His breathing was so weak it was barely discernible. Yet, throughout, he hadn't uttered a single word. The pursuers had vanished, and there was no point in carrying this potentially deadly burden. He gently patted the French prince's cheek, then stripped off his intact outer garments, replacing his own blood-soaked garments. Dressed in light, thin silk from the east, donning the golden crown and sash befitting a prince, he turned to gaze at the ornately decorated waterside courtyard before him. A mere wall, less than 3 meters high, truly separated 2 worlds. Not far from the palace gates lay the bustling streets of Paris. A crowd of children gathered around a candy vendor pushing a cart. Around the corner, a juggler, swallowing swords and breathing fire, displayed his unique skills. By noon, all shops were open. Hundreds of residents crisscrossed the crowded streets. Merchants, whips wielding, drove horse-drawn carriages into the city to unload their goods. Merchants, after completing their purchases, bought a few cheese and meat pies and prepared to depart for home. Everyone was busy pursuing their livelihoods. Yet, just a few hundred meters away, within the palace, utter silence reigned, devoid of any human voice, devoid of any trace of life. Looking up again, the 7 sword cultivators, who had been hovering in the sky, had vanished. The azure sky was devoid of clouds, only a single, blazing sun hung in the center. Strange. I can sense their presence, yet my eyes can't see them. What's going on? Have I unknowingly fallen into illusion again? This wasn't the first time Loki had encountered illusions that could deceive the eyes. After his time travel, he first encountered one at the Izumo Trading Company in Yorkshire. Within a vast hall, a zither player could transport people to new environments simply through the melodies of his gukin. When the zither player was slain by a guard's flying sword, the illusion instantly dissipated. In contrast, Nefertiti, the Sun Priestess, possessed a far more profound understanding of illusions. Sun Priestess were masters of manipulating light. Without the need for zither music or any prerequisite skills, she could directly lead Loki to the sun stairs within her sea of consciousness, communicating with him within his mind. After scaling the wall and entering the Imperial City, Loki again sensed the scent of illusion. This time, however, it was even more eerie because not a single living being appeared before him. After strolling around the courtyard and returning to the walls, he became even more certain it was a trap. The French prince, abandoned in the corner, and the blood-stained shirt he had taken off, had vanished. Scratched on the neck by himself and stabbed at least 10 times by Landbix's flying sword. The French prince was bleeding profusely. Yet, the emerald green grass beneath the wall was heavy with dew, and the flower baskets hanging from the palace walls were completely undamaged. The blood that had spilled on the grass had vanished, completely defying the law of spilt water cannot be recovered. It was as if time had been artificially forwarded by 10 minutes. Loki had no idea how much manpower would be required to maintain the entire palace within the illusion, but considering that a single shop at the Izumo Trading Company seemed capable of it, it seemed the French royal family was wealthy enough to employ nascent soul sword cultivators to protect the city, and a few eastern land sorcerers seemed no problem. Patting his cheeks to recharge himself, he picked up his axe and headed deeper into the palace. Ever since learning that Yun province had been invaded by the cult of Dagon, he knew this was inevitable. The arrogance of a great power denied him any chance for an equal dialogue. In this chaotic era, the only way to truly achieve fairness and justice was to charge into the French throne, Edward Longshanks, with his axe in hand. Only by shoving the axe between them could he secure a fair exchange. The only challenge now lay in escaping the illusion. Loki's understanding of the magic of the Eastern Land came entirely from online novels he'd read in his previous life. However, such imaginary creations of runes and formation points were ultimately far from scientific. Since crossing over in this life, he had never personally broken a formation. Once truly trapped within the illusion, he could only grope his way through it, attempting to decipher it. After quietly walking around the garden, he paused, mentally summarizing his observations. First, Within the garden, which covered nearly 1,000 square meters, he had entered the east and west wings, but again, he saw no one. Anything out of the ordinary must be demonic, and this demon is often the work of a demonic being. Where has this demonic being hidden? Secondly, the clusters of flowers in the garden, the almost brutal filling of his nostrils with rich floral fragrance, all of this is actually concealing traces of psychic energy. Since awakening his ancestral bloodline, his perception of psychic energy has far surpassed that of ordinary people. The Plantagenet family's massive demand for the special white cloud night rose may seem primarily decorative, but in reality, they're using this exotic species to construct a formation. When the white cloud night rose disappeared, the previously flawless formation began to show signs of weakness. Loki employed the simplest method of breaking through the situation, swinging his axe, smashing through everything he saw. Squinting his eyes, he sensed the direction of the psychic energy flowing in the air. He hacked down walls, crushed petals, and even chopped the tiles beneath his feet into as little shreds as possible. As expected, as large areas of the exquisite garden were damaged, the previously smooth flow of psychic energy quickly lost its stability. Without the carefully constructed orbital path, the trickle quickly grew violent, and the closed loop began to crack. The source of the psychic energy flowed directly to a well in the corner of the courtyard. Standing by the well, Loki could feel it like a fountain, rich psychic energy constantly gushing out. It flowed smoothly throughout the courtyard, finally returning to the center of the spring. Could someone be hiding beneath the surface? As the sun in the sky began to gradually shift westward, there was no time to waste. Gripping his axe tightly, he leaped deep into the well. Chapter 410, The Illusory Sky Garden. He fell into the well. Surprisingly, the pure water within the deep well wasn't cold at all. Instead, it felt warm as it surged around him. Having long battles within the blood mist illusion, Loki knew this was a sign of the rapid surge of pure psychic energy. He strained his eyes, trying to locate the alchemist supporting the magic circle. Unexpectedly, as he slowly descended into the pitch-black well, less than 2 minutes later, the darkness receded, and a faint azure light began to appear ahead. As he edged closer to the deep blue sky, the world suddenly reversed. The next second, he burst from the calm surface of the lake. This seemingly deep well concealed a portal capable of reversing the world. Loki plucked the leaves from his cheek and swam from the center of the lake to its edge. He struggled to shore, only to discover a vast courtyard 10 times larger than the one he had entered. A towering castle rose silently on the lake's shore. Standing by the lake, gazing down the mountain, he could see the water flowing naturally, forming a magnificent waterfall. Halfway through, the waterfall dissipated into mist, shrouding the ethereal gardens on the slope, like terraced fields, in a gray haze. All the gardens were deserted. Sitting by the lake, Loki gazed at the sun rising in the sky, lost in thought. This palace gave him a truly eerie feeling. Pursued by Landbix's sword, he scaled the courtyard wall. He clearly remembered the Grand Palais as being located not far from the center of Paris. However, now, emerging from the center of a tranquil lake, he found himself atop a towering mountain, with Paris at its foot. This completely contradicted everything he had seen since entering the city. Was this mountain hidden by the Plantagenet family's magic? Or had he been transported to another world, where the unreachable scenery at the foot of the mountain was all an illusion? He gazed once more at the cascading waterfall. He couldn't help but think of 7 words, Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If there really were a hanging garden, it would probably look like what he saw before him. No, narrowing his eyes, he could see the church square at the foot of the mountain, now under martial law. Golden scale guards and a large group of holy Episcopal monks were carrying out corpses covered in white cloth from the Inquisition. It was obvious that this was what he had just done. Then the answer seems clear. No one can create a real-time illusion like real-time surveillance. If everything I see before me is real, then there is indeed a mountain on the edge of Paris. It's just that this peak has been hidden by the Plantagenet family using illusionary magic. Why would they do this? Could there be some other secret hidden atop this mountain? This wasn't Loki's first encounter with royalty. The Egberts of Southampton, the Ellas of Oxford. Though these families were above mortals, they still held a certain air of worldliness. Now, he was in the Grand Palais in Paris. A deserted courtyard, a mountain shrouded in illusion, and behind it, a castle towering almost into the clouds. If all this hadn't happened in the real world, Loki would have thought he had stumbled back into Asgard, the icy city where the Aesir had imprisoned the frost giants. Nothing here held the warmth of a living being. But this was only the beginning. Regaining his composure, he entered the castle, where even stranger scenes began to unfold. Living beings indeed appeared within the castle. However, all of them moved mechanically, like puppets, following a fixed trajectory. Seeing Loki approach, they didn't speak to him. They simply stopped, glanced at him briefly with their bright eyes, and continued their stiff path. But many of his kind simply sat in their rooms, staring blankly ahead. Entering through the outer gate, Loki noticed that most of them were dressed in rich attire, and their faces bore many similarities. Could it be that these people are the Plantagenets? Why are all the people in this family so strange? Wenzoff had once mentioned that the stiff prince and princess resembled his eldest daughter, Sophie. Sophie had been like this before she received the imperial seal. She didn't fight or compete. She couldn't speak, and her brain didn't seem very bright. Nefertiti once said that Sophie was a soul box transformed by members of the Illuminati. Could it be that everyone in this castle is like Sophie, mindless and soulless? Loki paused, pausing in thought. I think I understand why those swordsmen dared not enter the imperial city. If the palace is full of this, if the true face of the Plantagenet family is like this, then the mastermind behind the rule of the Kingdom of France would surely not dare to let his subordinates enter without permission, the French royal family. This is a massive conspiracy unfolding in broad daylight. The Dark Ages were a bloody and chaotic time, when all people submitted to the oppression of their rulers. Constitutional monarchy wouldn't arrive for another 800 years. Monarchs were true kings within their fiefdoms. They treated their subjects as mere objects, plundering their wealth and exploiting their time and lives. Lords like Duke Bernard, petty and penny-pinching, ready to exterminate entire clans at the slightest disagreement, were the norm during this era. Even the honest Elam, a monarch known for his love of the people, only relied on policies that benefited him. In contrast, in the Duchy of France, merchants could trade freely, not fearing exploitation. They even had organizations like the Merchants' Guild to protect their rights. Peasants could farm freely, and aside from the land tax paid to their lords, they didn't have to worry about taxes like the king's dues. Perhaps for this reason, even though right of first night existed in this land, most people tolerated it. After careful consideration, it's easy to come to a conclusion. In this era, there simply isn't a royal family so completely unburdened by their people, so outrageously generous. If my guess is correct, the true rulers of this country must be Diamond Flower Durand, Grand Chancellor Ethan, and other Illuminati members. Only in this way can we explain France's economic strength. As for the interior of this mysterious palace, it's very likely that a true leader of the Illuminati is hiding. It's very likely the suzerain, whom I've never formally met. To maintain the secrecy of imperial power, he certainly wouldn't allow any living person easy access to the palace. Firstly, the old lizard's physical fitness and combat abilities are far from exceptional. Once their weaknesses are understood, not only the powerful Tang swordsmen, but even ordinary chosen ones, this group of creatures, generally devoid of offensive power, would be powerless against them. Secondly, it's inexplicable why all the people within the palace behave like this. They're all soulless, walking corpses. If my guess is correct, the old lizards of the Illuminati keep them here simply to wear these skins when convenient. Once Loki had grasped this, he no longer felt fear. Humans only fear the unknown. By this point, countless old lizards had perished at Loki's hands. These creatures, devoid of divine power, relying solely on the ability to wear human skin and survive, were not difficult to deal with. Chapter 411, Forward Traveler. The sovereign sat quietly in the throne room at the center of the castle. He stroked the skin that had just been transferred to him. This was his disguise for this life. Yes, he was Edward Longlegs, King of France. To be fair, he wasn't completely unprepared for what was unfolding before him. In his 200 million years, the sovereign had witnessed a rise and fall of 17 civilizations on this planet. After each civilization's complete dissolution, life would undergo a period of renewal lasting hundreds of thousands of years. However, once life arose, it was extremely difficult to erase. Creatures that survived the ashes of destruction always found a chance to rise again from the ruins. New life, wave after wave, would forge new civilizations from the ruins. The sovereign had seen them launch powerful creations into the void, open portals, and taken up arms to bravely resist extraterrestrial life. Yet, the lizardmen's mission remained constant. Throughout their 200 million year existence, the clan leader and his 12 clan masters have a single goal: to lead their tribes to survival. To this end, they have evolved the ability to wear the scales of other creatures, control voices, and extract partial memories from their hosts. The ultimate secret of this starry sky is a single one: to live until all others are dead over 200 million years, across 17 distinct civilizations. This isn't the first time the clan leader has encountered reverse time travelers transported through the chaos of time and space. In fact, human civilization has long documented numerous instances of time travelers. Each of these individuals, upon arriving in this unfamiliar land, believed themselves to be the chosen one, destined to change the rules of the world. The most famous of these was Wang Mang, the founding emperor of the Xin dynasty on the eastern continent 800 years ago, 45 BC 23 AD. He was the most radical of all time travelers. Unfortunately, the Xin dynasty's rule lasted only 15 years before fading into oblivion. He was a classic example of a time traveler. Arriving in another world, he used the knowledge he possessed, a knowledge not present in this world, to attempt to reshape it, forcing his subjects to operate according to his preconceived social rules. However, such individuals, without exception, were met with backlash from their subordinates. Loki was different. Born in the cold and impoverished Scandinavia, his beginnings as a time traveler were not good. One could even describe it as rough. Most time travelers with similar resources would die tragically before reaching adulthood. Yet, he miraculously survived. Frankly, he wasn't a gifted and chosen one. Like most time travelers, he made many mistakes. He once disbelieved in the gods, attempting to defy fate through sheer science and advanced production systems. However, all this ended with the appearance of old Valder. Since Valder brought him to the sunken city, a primal force within him was activated. He began to unleash his primal bloodlust, embraced his pirate identity, and expanded his power without restraint. In a sense, the Illuminati had created this demon for themselves. Of all the time travelers the sovereign had faced, Loki dealt him the most devastating blow. He had blended seamlessly with his plane. He had completely transformed himself into a native pirate lord, spurning almost all the trappings of a time traveler. Now, his goal was to eradicate the Illuminati from the Western continent. It must be said that he was doing a remarkable job. The sovereign must control the number of vassals allowed into the palace. After all, he was the only living person in the Grand Palais. 95% of the courtyards and pavilions of this vast, hundreds-hectare royal estate, a battlefield, lay empty, save for his meticulously constructed enchantment arrays. The so-called Gorse family was merely a deception cast by the Western continent's sovereign of the Illuminati. This secret was completely unknown even to many within the Illuminati. The sovereign protected himself meticulously. He had to, because he had ruled this land for thousands of years. Unlike Loki, who had traveled backwards through time, Mewtwo, the Lord of Earthsea, with a lifespan of 200 million years, is a forward time traveler, hidden among the civilizations that have ruled Earth for 17 generations. He tenaciously survived, like a cockroach caught in a crack. During these interminable ages, the lizardmen and leviathans hid on the fringes of the world, observing with aloof eyes as successive Earth rulers transformed the planet. Some hailed from beyond the 9 heavens, swiftly adapting to the planet's environment after their fall. Others, native to Earth, evolved from humble four-clawed creatures to the pinnacle of the food chain, surviving successive waves of alien gods and ultimately coming to dominate the planet. Of course, hundreds of different extraterrestrial life forms also descended upon the planet simultaneously, sparking a protracted war that lasted 100,000 years. Ultimately, the powerful gods perished, and the survivors quickly lost interest in the planet. Instead, the humble henchmen survived. After the era of giants and dragons dominating the planet, humanity, a tiny race, finally found its spring. The lizardmen sensed an opportunity. They successfully blended into the human population and established an organization called the Illuminati, secretly manipulating the course of human civilization. Mewtwo's home turf was the Western continent. The Northern continent, the Eastern continent, and the East-West continental bridge were governed by other suzerains, leaving him no need to worry. He only needed to manage his own turf. According to his observations of the previous 16 cycles of civilization, humanity must first enlighten before learning etiquette. Only with etiquette could one develop gratitude and reverence. Most reverse time travelers had survived 2, or at most 3, lifetimes. But Mewtwo had already survived 17 cycles of civilization. In terms of knowledge, experience, and mental storage, he far surpassed all figures of this era. Even most outer gods 130 years ago, while still cloaked in the guise of Charlemagne Carolingian, he launched a Renaissance movement, leveraging the wealth he had accumulated over centuries. He knew that this movement, so utterly out of step with the times, would immediately expose his true identity. Therefore, after achieving great success, the Carolingian dynasty rapidly declined, replaced by a different guise and a different name. His millennial-long reign over this continent was a secret unknown to all but the 12 overlords, not even to the outer reaches of the Illuminati. But today, this secret was about to be broken by Loki. He had no choice. He could only confront this enemy with the help of the Grand Palais in Paris, a place he had built over millennia. This was his home turf. From here, he had no chance of failure. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412 The Truth of History. When Loki entered the throne room, it felt like entering the Inquisition all over again. To either side of the room stood two silent rows of expressionless, dumbfounded humans, young and old, men and women. As Loki entered, all stared blankly ahead. The only resembling a living being in the room was King Edward Plantagenet of France, seated firmly on the throne. Every journey has an end, and it seems I'm finally nearing this one, Loki muttered calmly, his hands gripping the great axe. I wonder if I should address you as Edward Plantagenet, or my lord, or perhaps your real name, Muthu, King of Earthsea. 3 long years had passed since he first heard that name from the Yorkshire gatekeeper, and now he was finally before the real man. Although the man before him was a well-dressed, middle-aged Frenchman, after witnessing everything in the Ciri Palace, Loki knew for sure that beneath his skin lay an old lizard. Loki had seen him in his true form, without any skin, in the Obsidian Pyramid. Among the Illuminati, the one capable of possessing an entire palace in such a formidable display, only he could be. Young man, you are a rare talent. Mewtwo stood up and stepped down from the throne. I still want to kindly remind you that cooperating with me, the Illuminati, on this continent is beneficial and has no disadvantages. Instead of wielding an axe every day and living in fear, what's the harm in joining the Illuminati and siding with the world's most advanced and prosperous nation? A mortal's life is but a fleeting few decades. Wearing gold and silver, commanding tiny ants to carry food for you every day is one life. Rolling in the mud, struggling for survival is another. Mortal, why do you have to live such a tiring life? Haha, Loki chuckled softly, but remained silent. Hey man, don't assume that just because most people in this dimension don't recognize you, I certainly don't know you either. I come from an era where we're bombarded with information from television and the internet daily. The faces of the 12 Illuminati leaders are as dear to me as my own parents, because in my time, you guys have completely dropped your disguises. You appear in news reports almost every day. In the 21st century, the 13 Illuminati bloodlines are a semi-open secret on the internet. The patriarchs of the Kennedy, Lee, Rothschild, Rockefeller, and Morgan families were all members of the Illuminati. Their true faces have long been exposed in the spotlight, for the world to worship. You're not some great figure. Even in the 21st century, you're just a wealthy nouveau riche. In front of my Red Nation's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you're still a jerk who won't even answer back. You hold such a prominent position in the Mediterranean, yet you've fallen into the state. You possess nearly half of the Western continent's resources and millions of years of wealth, yet in this lifetime you can't even enter Constantinople, the Western continent's supreme seat of power. With such meager abilities, you still have the nerve to discuss cooperation with me. Who gave you the courage to be so arrogant? Mewtwo narrowed his eyes and stared at him. After a moment, he smiled instead, shaking his head helplessly. Young man, you're full of ambition. I can assume you haven't suffered any setbacks in your life. Your brain does store a lot of information that doesn't exist in this world, but don't forget. If only one of us survives. It's me who survives, so you'll see my name again in the future. That's a good question. Loki continued forward, carrying his axe. Ever since crossing over, I've never been able to figure out one thing. Am I actually standing on the same timeline as before? If this is a parallel dimension, why do names like Qin Shi Huang, Nuwa, Odin, Alfred, and even the Illuminati, all names written into history books, appear before me one after another? If I'm standing in my own timeline, Why is the history of 1,200 years ago completely different from what's recorded in the history books? Did the chosen ones, the ancient monsters, the dragons, the giants, all of these really exist, or were they tampered with and erased from history, or erased from the minds of mankind by you, the bunch? Is the knowledge imparted through television, books, experts, and courses always true? Not necessarily. However, when everyone accepts it as common knowledge, passing it down to future generations, even if it's false, it becomes true. This is the established law of the world. Human civilization has experienced countless instances of book burnings and burying scholars, when large numbers of people who knew the truth were slaughtered and the texts containing the information were burned. The victors, standing on the ashes, could create a new body of knowledge that benefited their rule and promote it as a theorem. A prime example of this is the leaded gasoline harmless theory. Scientists recognized the harmful effects of leaded gasoline as early as 1924. During that time, as many as 350,000 tons of lead were released into the atmosphere annually through gasoline combustion. This lead enters the human body through breathing and skin, placing a severe strain on the nervous system. Ultimately, it affected the intelligence of every newborn on Earth. However, the media is controlled by oil companies. Lead is a crucial ingredient in the synthesis of gasoline's anti-knock agent. To reduce costs, oil companies bribed academics to write academic papers and launch a massive propaganda campaign. They argued that lead has existed in the atmosphere since ancient times and, like carbon dioxide, is a naturally occurring substance in the atmosphere. It has nothing to do with gasoline combustion. In 1953, a lone hero, Claire Peterson, firmly believed that 95% of the lead in the atmosphere came from burning gasoline. He delved into Antarctica, excavating ice from various eras and meticulously comparing it, ultimately confirming that lead was completely absent from the atmosphere before 1924. He proved that this was all a conspiracy by oil companies seeking profit to destroy humanity. But to no avail. His opponent was a Shell Oil Company, backed by the monopoly giant Rockefeller. They continued to use every available means to manipulate the media, discrediting the public, and ultimately controlling the government. It wasn't until 1986, the same year that cheaper anti-explosion agents were introduced and the Clean Air Act, a beacon of democracy, was enacted, that leaded gasoline finally faded from history. In the face of this all-encompassing mastermind, all talk of morality, kindness, and a better future for humanity was utter nonsense. Any shred of instability that threatened their reputation and profits was ruthlessly extinguished. Similarly, even if someone on Earth discovered the remains of dragon bones and giants, the Illuminati could easily cover up the facts by manipulating public opinion and the media. Using a mixture of slander and threats, they easily achieve their goals. Take Claire Peterson, for example. The Rockefeller Foundation had only one message for him: shut up or get out. Get out meant expelling him from the University of California, ending his professorial career and closing his laboratory, transforming him from a respected professor into a homeless man, forced to do manual labor. Claire remained undeterred. He persisted in his struggle. But was it effective? It was completely useless. The monopoly continued to pollute humanity with leaded gasoline for 33 years. It wasn't until the advent of cheaper anti-explosion agents that their profits were guaranteed that they banned the product. And that was just a beacon of democracy. As for the rest of the world's less developed countries, it wasn't until after 2000 that leaded gasoline was completely eliminated. Humans can only accept the portion of the truth their rulers wish them to accept. This is the reality of living within this community. When the vast majority cannot leave their homes to conduct their own archaeological exploration, they can only passively absorb so-called documentaries, books, and media indoctrination. And all of this is likely false. Never mind, there's no point in saying more. Now that we've come this far, what can't be solved with my axe? Loki hefted his axe and strode towards the leader. Having battled the lizardmen numerous times, he had built up a deep sense of confidence. Every single one of them, regardless of species or rank, was a wimp. True, they could wear human skin, change their voices, possess brilliant brains, and live long lives. But none of them displayed any remarkable combat skills. Perhaps it was precisely because of this that the Illuminati were forever relegated to the background, waiting for the advent of firearms and other firearms, bringing humanity's armed forces to near universal unity. Only then would they dare to drop their disguises and step into the public eye. During the Dark Middle Ages, the Tang people had only just begun to grasp the power of gunpowder. At that time, The eastern continent's most advanced mechanical technology still consisted of the various projectile cold weapons crafted by the Mahist school. The advent of firearms was still a long, long way off. Undaunted, he raised his axe and swung it fearlessly at the sect leader. The sect leader smiled at him, offering no resistance. The axe whistled through the air, slicing through the sect leader's skin and bones. The single blow nearly severed his stubble. His neck, head, and half his shoulder hung crookedly at his waist. Strangely, even then, the sect leader's face still wore that eerie smile. Why aren't the green scales of the lizardman appearing on his body? Blinking hard, Loki reassured himself that the figure before him, whom he had divided into two, was a seemingly ordinary human. Amidst the gushing blood and pale bone fragments, there was no trace of the lizardman's skin color. Was this creature a true human? Or perhaps, a suzerain-level lizardman had transcended mortal form and evolved to another level? Young man, you're right, the head, nearly touching the ground, grinned. Before he could pull his axe from the shattered bones, several figures rapidly approached from behind. Too late, before he could turn around. He felt the cold blade of a knife pierce his waist. The brief pain was followed by a persistent tingling sensation, the sensation only caused by the poison-coated blade. You belong to me now. His consciousness rapidly blurred, and he saw several figures approaching him at some point. They were all the soul boxes that had been standing blankly on both sides of the hall. In that instant, he suddenly understood the meaning of the soul boxes. These mindless humanoid dolls had a single purpose. They are containers for the clan leaders to achieve soul travel. Chapter 413, The Road Home, 1. As Loki reached his wits' end, Alfred and Wenzoff, fleeing outside Paris, were similarly surrounded by the Golden Guard. France had been able to maintain its position in the western continent for centuries. While trade was their primary weapon, the French army, built on the strength of their wealth, was no less formidable. At the city gate, Loki bent the bolt with his bare hands, temporarily blocking the Golden Guard's escape route. At this point, only 100 or so Golden Guards could follow Alfred's troops. The Vikings seized horses and fled north, leaving the city walls. The unprepared Golden Guards were forced to plunder the merchants' horses. However, once they mounted their horses, they immediately realized a vast gap between themselves and the Vikings. Alfred and his companions wore light leather armor, while the Golden Guards wore heavy iron chainmail. This armor, crafted from hundreds of forged iron, from helmet to mail to weapons, weighed nearly 40 kilograms. The difference between commercial pack horses, used to carry goods and pull carriages, and military horses was a world apart. After only a few hundred meters, they were already far behind the Vikings. But the Golden Scale Guards were not helpless. Several dazzling fireworks exploded high into the sky, and just over 10 minutes later, flying steeds began to appear near the horizon. Behind them, a dozen even larger figures emerged. They were giant dragons soaring into the sky. At the dragon's center, two eastern continent swordsmen soared with their swords. Brothers! Charge into the woods, Alfred shouted. Get away from the open ground as quickly as possible. Only by rushing into the woods can we avoid the dragon's pursuit. Besides, in the dense forest, we have trees to block our way. Cavalry, unable to charge, is not a threat, Alfred shouted, kicking the horse beneath him furiously in the stomach. The horses used by the caravan to transport their goods were not, after all, high-quality war horses. Despite sensing the tension of their masters, they ran with all their might. But as a white cloud rapidly approached behind them, a valiant Pegasus knight, clad in silver armor and wielding a halberd, spread his wings and glided close behind the group. Globally, Pegasus, a creature that has survived from ancient times, can only thrive in France, because in this era, only this land retains the abundant spiritual energy of the ancient times. Pegasus's strength lies in their ability to soar with their wings spread and to run at high speeds with them folded. They possess exceptional all-around abilities, but just as hexagonal warriors are often synonymous with mediocrity, Pegasus knights lack the speed of Moa knights, and their endurance on land is inferior to that of tall horses. Their decorative purpose far outweighs their combat effectiveness. Upon entering the forest, they were ambushed. Alfred, realizing his horses could no longer carry them for the long sprint, abandoned them and climbed into a tree. As the vast herd of Pegasus burst into the woods, a dozen of them immediately descended from the treetops, piercing the knights' skulls with their long swords and rapiers. Engulfed in close combat, the Pegasus's combat disadvantages were immediately apparent. These creatures were too slow to turn, advance, or retreat within a short area. To move forward, ordinary horses would simply raise their front hooves and run. However, any movement by a Pegasus required the first step of extending its 2-3-meter-long wings. A group of 3 or 5 Pegasus might have been able to maneuver in a chaotic situation. But now, nearly 50 Pegasus riders were suddenly ambushed in the dense forest, and the consequences were catastrophic. Blinded by the scattering of snow-white wings, the Pegasus riders felt like ants in a chicken coop, their heads and toes swarming with hard feathers. Even swinging their silver spears would have been a matter of concern for accidentally striking their comrades not far ahead. Meanwhile, the Vikings, though numbering only a dozen or so, had no need to hide from their companions when it came to killing. Everywhere he looked, a blanket of white lay before him, behind him, and on his left. Anything white he saw was a matter of course. He simply attacked with his weapons. In just over 10 minutes, over 50 pursuers had been hacked to pieces. Before the sword cultivators and the golden scale guards could break into the woods, they had already mounted the remaining Pegasus, flapping their wings and galloping through the dense forest. Brothers, follow me towards Versailles. The French city-state has a rule that dragons cannot enter the city, but as long as we can enter, we'll be rescued. Francis spoke with a sense of trepidation. He had only struck a deal with the Fire Bishop Mikra only a few hours ago. Ever since entering the Inquisition and Loki's public killing, everything had rapidly descended into chaos and disorder. The old patriarch had no confidence that the Zoroastrianism would be as effective as the legends claimed. Even more worrying was the powerful sword cultivators galloping behind him. There were only 2 of them, but their speed was far greater than that of the dragons and Pegasus. In just a few breaths, icy swords began to fly behind them. The Pegasus stretched its wings, half running, half gliding, barely keeping out of the flying sword's range. Versailles Castle was still a considerable distance away. Master Wenzoff, we can't keep running like this, Alfred said gravely to the old butler beside him. My foster father once said that turning and running on the battlefield, leaving your back to the enemy, is the most dangerous act. Furthermore, we're now facing 2 Eastern Continent swordsmen. If we keep running like this, we'll surely die. It's better to turn around and fight them. The Vikings turned and looked around. Alfred quickly earned the Vikings' recognition, precisely because of the surging fighting spirit that burned within him almost constantly. Everyone drew their weapons, but Wenzoff remained silent. He gripped the Pegasus's reins with one hand, while the other held Ulysses Ella firmly under his shoulders. No one else present had witnessed the might of the Tang Dynasty sword cultivators, but on that blood-soaked night in Hanshu village, he had witnessed firsthand the price Loki, Katya, Jerome, and Lawrence had paid to slay that formidable swordsman. They were a completely different breed of warrior from the Western continent's chosen ones. To the Tang Dynasty sword cultivators, who cut people like grass, there was no essential difference between living people and pasture. No way, completing Duke Loki's mission is our top priority. Now that the Duke has entered the Imperial City alone, his fate remains uncertain. If the worst comes to the worst, we must at least ensure someone can return to Normandy and successfully deliver the message. Besides, you haven't seen the power of the East Continent. Even if all of us attack together, we might not survive the attack of those 2. Everyone present was a battle-hardened soldier, except Wenzoff, who had lived for 40 years and had experienced the complex political struggles of his time. With Loki's fate uncertain, the most urgent task was to ensure someone could successfully return to Normandy and deliver the news that the Duke had fallen into enemy hands. If they all die here, once those old lizards of the Illuminati put on Loki's skin and replace his rule openly, all the Vikings will be greeted by a world-destroying disaster. Chapter 414, The Road Home, 2. When the snow-white walls of Versailles finally came into view, only 7 Vikings remained of the fleeing force. Indeed, as Wenzoff had said, facing the soaring Tang Dynasty sword cultivators, the Vikings, lacking ranged skills, had no means of counterattack. Whether using lassos or throwing axes, their attacks extended to a maximum of 15 meters, whereas a giant in stage sword cultivator could manipulate their flying swords to inflict damage up to 50 meters. This was at least 3 times the Vikings' attack range. Furthermore, the swift flying swords could easily pierce even fine iron shields, not to mention the soft leather armor commonly worn by Vikings. As the flying swords began rapidly slicing through his comrades at the rear, Alfred immediately realized the naivety of his idea of engaging these 2 adversaries. It wasn't like he had never seen these flying sword-wielding Eastern Continental people before. Constantinople was a city of trading companies and merchants from the eastern continent daily. Regarding the Tang dynasty sword cultivators, their mentors advised them to never provoke them lightly. Even after the Lushan rebellion, the Tang dynasty in the east remained the greatest nation in the world. Princes from smaller nations in the western continent were forced to surrender to their flying swords. No court dared to try the Tang dynasty sword immortals who cut through people with ease. The young and energetic Alfred dismissed these men. They were all flesh and blood. A single wound would kill them. Especially since he had recently drunk a magic potion, entered Asgard, and then slaughtered his way through the Cloud Province, earning the respect of all Vikings. He had become inflated, believing he could even fight a soaring sword immortal. Until then, reality had mercilessly struck him down from the sky. Discarding armor and weapons was an understatement, unable to describe the devastation of this unit. To reduce weight and allow more of their companions to survive the pursuit of the swordsman, they first abandoned their hostages. The Princess of France and the King of Mercia were abandoned in the forest, left to fend for themselves. Within the crowded city, the common people of Paris thronged. If the sword cultivators killed or injured their hostages, numerous witnesses would witness the incident, and the news would spread throughout the city within 3 days. But in the deserted wilderness, let alone a French princess, even if the Pope died there, the Golden Scale Guards would find over 100 excuses to shirk responsibility. Therefore, the hostages had no deterrent effect in this area. Fleeing desperately through the dense forest, the Vikings didn't even bother to kill them, simply pushing them off the backs of their Pegasus. Unfortunately, the flying sword cultivators showed no interest in the hostages either. They simply dropped 2 smoke flares, leaving the pursuing Golden Scale Guards to deal with them. They soared at breakneck speed, relentlessly pursuing the fleeing hostages. What followed were the Vikings' weapons, leather armor, and the purses and jewelry they had looted from the nobles. While acquiring gold and silver was important, the first priority was to survive. All excess weight was ruthlessly cast aside. Sensing danger, the Pegasus raised its wings and glided rapidly through the woods. Near the city, travelers carrying tents and blankets, and pure white unicorns wandering the woodlands with their heads lowered, began to appear. This meant that Versailles Castle lay just ahead. But it also meant that the dense forest was about to end. From the forest's edge to the city, a marshy stretch of nearly 12 kilometers stretched, with virtually no trees to block the path. Both sides of the road were lush wetlands, with small lakes connected one after another, forming a unique habitat for unicorns. In the center of the lakes ran a flat, official road about 10 meters wide. This road was crowded with camel caravans driven by merchants heading to Paris. These final 12 kilometers would be a dead end for the fleeing Vikings on Pegasus. Flying was impossible. In the sky, a flying Pegasus was like meat on a chopping block for a sword cultivator. Instead, it would be better to infiltrate the caravan and see if they could exploit the Pegasus's speed and the overwhelming crowds to carve out a path. This is the last 12 kilometers. As long as we can enter the city, we'll receive immediate help. Father Francis knew they were now in dire straits. He wasn't entirely sure the Firebringers would be able to help them. But at this point, he had no choice but to use this method to motivate the others. They had already lost too many of their own people on this journey. Of the dozen or so Vikings who survived, even if one could return safely and bring word that Loki had fallen into the hands of the lizardmen, that would be enough to alleviate their immediate crisis. "Children, you go ahead, I'll cover the rear." Wenzoff was about to slow down when Alfred threw a lasso, yanking him from his mount and pulling him to his side. "Master Steward, your position in the heart of our foster father is much more important than that of the honest man Ella. Without Master Ella, the worst that can happen is that Mercia will fall into civil war, and we will pick up axes and fight them again. But if you die, it is hard to imagine who else our foster father will trust in the rainy highlands. Can he still rely on my foster mother, whose heart is brighter than a sheep? As long as there is a slight possibility, I will help him bring you back safely." After saying this, Alfred pulled the reins suddenly, and the Pegasus felt pain. When it was about to spread its wings and fly into the sky, a group of strange merchants in black robes walking towards them on the official road light torches in unison. Facing the afterglow of the setting sun, dark red smoke instantly covered the entire pipeline. Blindly unable to eat, the galloping Pegasus crashed head-on into the camel caravan in front of it. Alfred rolled off the horse, and before he could draw his broadsword, several big hands suddenly stretched out in front of him, and their palms were depicted with the flame symbol of the Zoroastrianism. "Master Alfred, don't move," We are members of the Fire Gang living in Versailles Castle. We are here to rescue you under the orders of the Fire Priest Big Sparrow. Time is running out. Please relax your body and don't resist. Believe in the assistance ability of my Fire Gang." After breaking out of the dense forest, the sword cultivators were already approaching. The members of the Chuan Hao Gang pulled Alfred up, took out a black shawl and covered his shoulders. Then, they threw him and went off beside him into the quiet lake. The sound of splashing echoed one after another, and dozens of figures jumped into the lake together in the thick smoke. The two sword cultivators hovered in midair, exchanged a glance, and chose not to pursue. Just as an arrow loses its power when shot into water, a flying sword's power is also greatly reduced underwater. If a sword cultivator's body enters the water, they will lose their pride in their speed and wide-range attack capabilities. In terms of individual power, they will be infinitely closer to that of a mortal. Entering the water under such circumstances is unwise. Moreover, there are too many merchants entering the water at the same time. They are wearing uniform black hoods, which clearly indicates that this is a premeditated rescue operation. When the smoke cleared, most of the merchants on the official road had disappeared, and only the burning torches still emitted wisps of red smoke. Chapter 415, The Road Home, 3. The wetland lakes flanking the official road were shallow, less than 10 meters deep. After jumping into the water, the firebearers took out two slender straw tubes and inserted them into Alfred and Wenzoff's mouths. Once they were able to breathe, they quickly disappeared beneath the surface. It was clear that this wasn't the first time the firebearers had done something like this. Every member of the Zoroastrianism was required to serve the cult to the best of their ability. These hidden agents within Versailles Castle had long since, unnoticed, dug through the shallow lakes and the wetlands. Normally, they could sneak into the park late at night, quietly slaughter a few unicorns, and smuggle the precious unicorn spiral horns and unicorn blood into the city through the underground canals. But today, they had become underwater passages that facilitated the Vikings' entry into the city. They first entered a drainage ditch from the shallow lake, then, through a hidden tributary, successfully entered the Versailles Castle moat. Stealthily, they advanced along the moat's edge. Alfred could see the shimmering surface of the water, where the well-armed golden scale guards had already firmly guarded the gates. Having chosen their escape route, they had never considered entering Versailles. But now, they had to admit, the most dangerous place was the safest. They had been beneath the water's surface and waited until the sun had completely set before continuing along the moat. Wenzoff, a veteran Viking seafarer, knew lurking underwater was no problem for him, but Alfred, born in the royal palace of Wessex, was clearly less comfortable. Breathing through a sturdy straw tube extending from the surface was easy enough to say, but actually doing it required considerable effort and patience. Especially to maintain their concealment, each breath they exhaled underwater had to be slow and steady. Fortunately, after 2 arduous hours, as darkness enveloped the earth once again, the moat drawbridge was raised. The group finally had a chance to advance again. Their goal was the main sluice gate for releasing water from the moat. The moat surrounding the castle was extremely useful in preventing siege engines from getting close to the walls and preventing attackers from scaling the walls with ladders. For a city outside the English Isles, possessing a moat capable of defending against foreign enemies was a rare asset. No one paid much attention to replacing the water in the moat. The water in the moat was mostly stagnant. Long barren, it was a dark green, and almost always suffused with a pungent, unpleasant odor. Such a thing was unacceptable to the French nobility, who had refinement ingrained in their bones. The moats of Paris and its 5 surrounding cities not only had their water replaced weekly, but also had to be regularly cleared of any debris that had sunk to the bottom. Perhaps only the Duchy of France had the financial and manpower to handle such a task in the entire Western continent. And today, the sluice gates that released the moat became a breakthrough point for Vikings. The fire passengers had to wait until sunset, when the 2 city defense teams changed shifts. Only during this time could they climb into the inner city through the open sluice gates. Another group of fire passengers had already been waiting at the moat's outlet. Upon seeing the Vikings emerge, they immediately unloaded a dozen or so pieces of golden scale armor from their backs and tossed them before the group. A leading golden scale guard centurion spoke gravely. Today, many golden scale guards from Paris have entered the city. Although they and we belong to the same unit, we rarely interact on a daily basis. We don't recognize each other. This is the standard golden scale guard armor. Once you put it on, don't speak and follow me silently. My mission is to take you to the next rendezvous point. Put it on now. Remember, try not to make eye contact with anyone. Most of you don't speak French. If someone initiates a conversation with you, don't say a word. Wait for me to rescue you. In this era, no one is more expert in smuggling, illegal immigration, spying, and transmitting intelligence than the tightly organized Zoroastrians, with their clear rewards and punishments. All actions of the fire transmission gang are carried out in stages. Each group of gang members, hidden within the enemy, will only carry out the part they are best at. After completing their mission, they will immediately return to their latent state, completely uninvolved in the next plan. This way, even if something went wrong at any point, the rest of the firebenders would have ample time to retreat or find another way to complete the commission. In the Golden Scale Guards organization, a centurion commanding 100 soldiers was considered a moderately accomplished mid-level leader. This secret agent was responsible for rotating guard duty at all the city gates. Donning their full armor, the 7 surviving Vikings followed the leader, forming a single file and ceremoniously changing shifts as they exited the fortress. After leaving, they didn't immediately proceed to their next location. Instead, like other Golden Scale Guards who had completed their work in the city, they went to a bar for a drink. Normally, such a risky move would have been a sure sign of vulnerability, but today, a full 1,000 Golden Scale Guards from Paris had poured into the city, guarding the 4 gates of Versailles and securing all the city streets. With identical clothing and weapons, they were led into the bar by the centurion without arousing the slightest suspicion. After ordering a few glasses of beer and plates of fragrant barbecue, the group was surprised to find that the 2 Tang Dynasty swordsmen who had been following them calmly passed by without even a hint of suspicion. As expected, in the eyes of the Tang people of the eastern continent, all Western faces looked the same. Especially when wearing the same standard armor, it was difficult to distinguish between individuals. After a simple dinner, they watched a bard sing about the heroic deeds of the great King Charlemagne Carolingian in resisting the Arab invasion. After dropping a few copper coins, the centurion confirmed that he had stayed in the bar for the average time after the Golden Scale Guards went off duty, and then led the group out. They continued walking in a single file down the street. With that, the most difficult step was complete. No one would even glance at a group of Golden Scale Guards emerging from the bar. It was clear that the city was still under martial law. The Golden Scale Guards guarding the intersections meticulously questioned every passing merchant, not only searching their bodies but also the luggage on their wagons. They treated every merchant walking the streets as a formidable enemy. The centurion, however, calmly leading his troops through the streets, never questioned anyone. He would sometimes lead his men on a leisurely pace, sometimes pausing to converse quietly with a decurion guard in the intersection. During these moments, Alfred and Wenzoff would lean against the street, calmly taking a few puffs from their pipes. After crossing the street, we need to disperse. Everyone, please keep an eye out for the colorful doors along the street. When you see someone waving to greet you, follow them into the house, don't ask too many questions, and don't engage in unnecessary conversation. This is your shelter tonight. We can't transport you out of the city during the night curfew. You'll have to wait until tomorrow morning for the next wave of the firebearers to arrive and pick you up. My mission is accomplished here. Good luck to everyone. The centurion, fearing that the Vikings wouldn't understand English, repeated his words in his broken Viking tongue. He was followed by a group of people as he entered the residential area. By the time he entered his own house, it was empty. Another day of flights and work. Updates may be late sometimes, but I'll try to update every day. Chapter 416, The Road Home, 4. If a group of Golden Scale Guards rushed into a single home after get-off work, it would be a very risky move. It was unnatural. On the other hand, if each person dispersed to a different house, it would be like soldiers returning home to rest after completing their duties. Even if observed, no one would raise a finger. Once the population reached a certain size, the Zoroastrians' undercover agents, under the umbrella of the fire priests, could mitigate any potential risks. Meanwhile, the mysterious fire priest of Versailles, nicknamed Big Sparrow, had already sat down before Alfred. Had he not revealed his identity, Alfred would have found it hard to believe that such a meticulous rescue plan was in his hands. This man was even younger than he was. He was only 13, a student who had just returned from a religious school. The 13-year-old returned home, dropped his school bag at his mother in the room, and then immediately entered the bird society behind the house. Like all members of the fire priests, Big Sparrow was of humble origin. Their family had been involved in poultry farming for generations, and behind the house stood two massive chicken co-ops. These housed egg-laying hens, quail for sale to the nobility, and a small number of ornamental birds like pigeons and parrots. Even if I were to be roasted in the eternal flames for 100 years, I still can't imagine what kind of madness would cause your lordship, Duke Loki, to expose the true identity of his suzerain to his face. The High Sparrow, scattering stinking bird feet into the coop, turned back to chat with Alfred. Alfred stared in astonishment at what lay before him. A fire priest, whose rank was equivalent to that of a regional bishop, had to attend school during the weekdays, but after school, he actually had to personally feed the chickens in a coop reeking of chicken manure. Who would have thought that such a humble individual, struggling in the dirt, could be such a distinguished fire priest? No wonder the Inquisition publicly burned so many heretics at the stake each year, yet the fire priests continued to persecute them. They all lived in their own disguise. I'm not entirely sure what plans my foster father has in mind, but he was able to completely change the Vikings' position on this continent in just 3 years. He must be a man of extraordinary talent, haha. Amazing talent, and extraordinary talent. I think he's more like a brainless fool. After quickly spreading the chicken feed, the High Sparrow turned and walked over to the birdcage. The cage wasn't tightly closed, but wide open to the sky. As night fell, gray-white sparrows occasionally swooped down from the sky. The young man held out his snow-white wrist and caught them steadily. The sparrows chirped rhythmically. The High Sparrow put his left ear close to the bird, listening carefully. After listening to each one, he would place the most insignificant bird in the birdcage and then feed it fragrant roasted grass seeds. My guess was right, excited. The High Sparrow even grabbed a handful of grass seeds and tossed them into his mouth, chewing them with a crunching sound. Turning to look at Alfred, his eyes had curved into crescents. My dear Master Alfred, you can't say we servants took the money and didn't do the job. Your lordship, the Duke, chose not to leave the city, but instead plunged headfirst into the Grand Palais in Paris. What does he think he is? Odin reincarnated, tisk tisk, a desperado like that might not appear once in 100 years. Does he really think, with his mortal body, he can be a match for that old lizard? Alfred narrowed his eyes. He had never imagined that the half-grown child before him could actually be a beast speaker. This ability couldn't be learned, but only inherited through the thin bloodline of the ancestors. This thin bloodline made it extremely difficult for them to communicate with hundreds of animals like their ancestors. After thousands of years, even for this generation to be able to understand the language of a single animal species was a truly rare achievement. Alfred had once seen someone in Constantinople who could converse with elephants. Yet, in practical terms, his abilities were tenfold inferior to those of the Big Sparrow, who could converse with sparrows. With the Big Sparrow's abilities, he could have landed a job as an intelligence chief or similar position in any country. Yet, he was content to live in the castle of Versailles, serving as a simple fire priest. Hey, Your Highness, don't look at me like that. Compared to my abilities, it seems you should be more concerned about your adoptive father right now. My little bird told me he's been controlled by the master. If you walk by the river, you're bound to get your feet wet. If God wants to destroy you, he must first make you swell up. This is the consequence of continuous victories and excessive arrogance. Upon hearing that his adoptive father had fallen into the hands of the enemy, Alfred was immediately uneasy. Despite a day filled with trials, slaughter, and flight, the knightly spirit etched in his bones still drove him to rescue his adoptive father from the clutches of danger. However, upon standing, he felt a wave of dizziness. Your Highness, how could the food the firebenders, prepared for you be so delicious? The High Sparrow bared his white teeth again, but this time his smile held a hint of sinister malice. This expression ruthlessly revealed to Alfred that these pagans, while seemingly helping him, were no friends. Duke Loki has fallen into the hands of that old lizard, Mewtwo, and is beyond saving. While Mewtwo may not execute him immediately, the Illuminati's soul-searching technique is no joke. They learned this soul-torturing technique from the priests of the Styx. Given enough time, there's no information they can't extract. Remember, Duke Loki isn't his true target. What this old fellow truly desires is that Asgard portal in your hands. Numb throughout his body, Alfred slowly moved his left hand to draw his broadsword, but the toxins that had digested the food and entered his stomach were now spreading throughout his body. Even moving his legs was difficult, let alone moving his arms. Your Highness, please trust the professionalism of the fire thief. Since you have accepted such a valuable gift as the Imperial Seal, We will definitely send you survivors back to Normandy safely. From now on, no one can harm you, including yourselves. Chapter 417, The Road Home, 5. When a church expands to a certain size, the sheer number of guild members necessitates more meticulous divisions within its ranks to maximize the potential of each member. Take, for example, the Holy Lord Church, the largest church in the Western continent at the time. Within the church, there are the Crusaders, a professional military force, and the Silent Sisters, a department tasked with guarding sealed artifacts and organizing ancient documents. Of course, there are also the Blood Martyrs, filled with fanatical believers, and the Thorny Hermitage, composed entirely of ascetic monks. Although all of them belong to the Holy Lord Church, minor conflicts between different sects are common, sometimes even leading to full-scale clashes over personal interests. The same is true of the Zoroastrianism, a sect comparable in size to the Holy Bishop. Firebenders with varying specialties are discovered by firebender priests and, if they excel, are assigned to different departments. Among these, the firebenders, standing tall at the pinnacle of the pyramid, are known as fire thieves. The fire thieves are a group of humans walking on the edge of a knife, accepting the most dangerous missions within the church. These included stealing religious relics, kidnapping members of the royal family, smuggling vulnerable hostages, and stealing crucial intelligence. Fire thieves were the most deadly spies, a dangerous profession that must be eliminated upon discovery. All kingdoms and churches kept a close watch on them. Their every appearance often meant enormous trouble. But high risk also meant high stakes. Every fire thief in the Arab Empire was a trainee. Whether they were the 5 Cinder Kings or the Arab Empire's rulers, the Abbasid family, they all held each one in the highest respect. Within the empire, they were all heroes. Alfred had never imagined that the 13-year-old beast language before him would hold such a prestigious position. Although his body was numb, he remained conscious. He waited for his eyes to turn to the High Sparrow, and a startling truth gradually formed in his mind. Yes, that's right. Your thinking was correct. After feeding all the flat-haired creatures in the chicken coop, the High Sparrow dragged Alfred to a side hall like a dead dog. Be bolder, and the truth will be revealed before your eyes. I was right. They must be secretly monitoring the Lord. Alfred had seen the world since childhood. Even in the Pantheon, where talent abounds, intelligence officers like the Big Sparrow are rare. Tiny sparrows are everywhere, and neither mortal nor divine being would spare the slightest attention for the tiny birds hopping around them. Possessing the ability to control and communicate with sparrows, the Big Sparrow is unrivaled in the art of espionage. Should he so choose, he could easily monitor every corner of human civilization. Alfred wasn't surprised that such a gifted member of the Firebender could ascend to the position of fire thief. However, his willingness to reside in a small, remote town like Versailles Castle, as a Firebender priest, was deeply eerie. The Zoroastrianism was a machine, constantly operating with precision. The Firebenders would meticulously utilize every resource at their disposal, and would never allow such a talent to dwell in a remote town. The answer seemed obvious. They had clearly long known that the Edward Plantagenet hidden within the palace was actually Mewtwo, the Lord of Earthsea, one of the 12 Lizardmen. While Mewtwo was secretly controlling the Kingdom of France, the fire thieves had already been quietly lurking around him. Their surveillance of the Lord hadn't just begun today, it had been ongoing. Indeed, Master Alfred, to graduate from the Pantheon with top honors, you are truly as brilliant as the outside world says you are. The Firebenders, posing as the High Sparrow's parents, lifted the numbed Alfred and tossed him onto the sofa. When outsiders were watching, they played their roles to the utmost. But when night fell and the chicken farm's gates were closed, they treated the High Sparrow with the utmost respect, diligently carrying out his every instruction. Ever since being promoted to fire thief by Archbishop Sassas, my mission completion rate has remained at 100%. Since I've accepted the Duke's deposit, I naturally must find a way to save his life. Now, you must get down to business. Don't move, just listen carefully. Waving off 2 of his men, the High Sparrow pulled up a chair and sat down next to Alfred. He raised a finger, his expression grim. Today isn't dangerous, the real danger is how we'll get you out of the city tomorrow. Since you've got the help of the Firebenders, this is no longer a secret to the city's Golden Scale Guard. Since you entered the city, they've been investigating anyone suspected of colluding with the Zoroastrians. We've had no choice but to sacrifice some of our followers to save your lives. In front of Alfred, the High Sparrow made no attempt to maintain a glorious image. Hearing his stomach growl twice, he remembered he hadn't eaten yet. He stood up and went into the kitchen, pulling out 2 large pancakes and smearing them with chili sauce. He stuffed the pancake into his mouth as he returned to Alfred. "Don't worry, we're safe for now, but tomorrow, leaving the city will be a huge test for all of us." The High Sparrow wiped his mouth as crumbs of the pancake flew from his mouth. "At least one of you must return home alive to save Duke Loki's life. Can't figure out the logic? Don't worry, listen carefully. We know 2 theorems. 1. Ever since Duke Loki's spectacular skinning show at his wedding, the Lizardmen and the Illuminati have become no secret among Vikings. 2. The Overlord is fighting you Vikings for one reason and one reason only, the Asgard portal. If you return alive, you can pass on the news to the other Vikings. Duke Loki has fallen into the hands of the Illuminati. The Vikings will deduce a highly likely scenario: Duke Loki will be killed, and then the old lizard will wear his human skin. At this point, if the beloved Lord Sovereign were truly foolish enough to disguise himself as Loki and return to Normandy, attempting to retrieve the Asgard portal under the Duke's guise, it would be like a sheep walking into a hungry wolf's mouth. With his shrewdness, the Lord would surely not do such a foolish thing. He would spare Loki's life, then perform the soul search technique to extract his memories of the portal. While this would certainly be less efficient than directly extracting information from him under Loki's identity, we must admit that being alive is better than anything else. Although the soul search technique would take months, with a bit of time, he would undoubtedly discover the hidden location of the Asgard portal. This meant that at least the Duke was still alive. The High Sparrow stuffed the entire pancake into his mouth, gulped down several mouthfuls of cold water, and flicked off the sesame seeds. "But on the other hand, if all of you die here, no one will be able to bring back the news of the Duke's capture for your Viking friends. Our respected Lord can wear his skin at will and continue to sit on the throne of the Duke of Normandy. In this case, the respected Duke Loki will definitely die. Because compared to the time-consuming and labor-intensive soul-searching technique, wearing human skin will naturally bring more benefits and is more stable." Alfred looked at the High Sparrow with a sharp gaze. He wanted to speak, but the poison paralyzed the nerves in his body. He was speechless. "I know what you want to say. Master Alfred, I advise you. Don't even think about it. It's impossible for us to help you pass on the message. This is indeed not difficult for the members of the Fire Transmission Gang. But you may have forgotten one crucial thing. Only the ignorant can be fearless. In the whole world, only a bunch of crazy people like you dare to provoke the Illuminati. And we have seen too many abilities of Illuminati members, and have experienced their dark methods many times in the past 100 years. We dare not take the initiative to challenge their authority. We assisted you in escaping from France this time because you showed too much sincerity. The Patriarch will not be happy to know this, but at least he can express his understanding. This is the business that a group of people are in. With the imperial seal in hand, no matter how he punishes us, even if he expels us from French soil forever, even if it costs hundreds of lives, we can accept it. Because finding the imperial seal of the Qin dynasty will be the greatest achievement of the fire thief in the past 100 years. But if we help you pass on information again, we will be completely on your side. This is a huge issue of principle, which means that we have officially allied with the Vikings and stood on the opposite side of the Illuminati. This is a red line that the Chuan Ho gang will not take. Let alone a royal seal. Even if you bring Qin Shi Huang's sword Taya, we will not declare war on the Illuminati. One king of Earthsea Mewtwo is enough to give people a headache, and in the Illuminati, there are 11 other old ones who are as crazy as him. Among them, there is a patriarch who is more terrifying than a madman. When the word patriarch was mentioned, he was as arrogant as a sparrow, and a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. We will assist you in escaping this continent as per the contract, but everything that follows will still be up to you. The Flame Chuan gang, will do as much as I'm paid. To truly reverse the situation, you must rely on your own strength. After solemnly explaining everything, the High Sparrow stood up and discreetly parted the curtains to glance out at the street. Torch-wielding golden scale guards continued patrolling the streets, knocking on doors and entering to check the identities of all residents. The High Sparrow showed no sign of panic. He had a significant number of his men hidden within the golden scale guards. They would naturally help her resolve this problem. But he still had to put on a good show. With a gentle snap of his fingers, his parents reappeared. They brought out a tray with several cups of milk tea and 7 or 8 boiled eggs. This was a midnight snack prepared by the chicken farm owners for the soldiers on the streets. The High Sparrow lived in a constant state of disguise. The High Sparrow's identity within Versailles Castle was that of a student born on a chicken farm. Everything his family did had to conform to their identity. This was the best way to avoid suspicion. Your Highness, the dragon slayers described by the bards sound majestic and powerful, but you now understand what it's like to truly walk that path. The thrilling scenes recorded in the Bible, like Moses leading the Jews out of Egypt, or the seraph wielding a flaming sword to slay demons, they don't tell you that the Holy Lord Jehovah was willing to save the Jews because so few in Kyushu at the time believed in him. They also don't tell you that the number of angels slaughtered by the demons was 10 times greater than the number of demons killed. This was actually a campaign to purge political enemies, to clip the wings of the 12 angels. Alice, the High Sparrow sighed, revealing a maturity unbecoming of his age. The anesthetic will wear off before tomorrow's sunrise. You've had a long day. It's late, so take advantage of this opportunity to get some sleep and recover your strength. I'll change your face while you sleep. Tomorrow morning, you can use my identity as a worker, and I'll personally escort you out of the city. Don't mind your clothes that smell of chicken shit. With a slight blink of his left eye, the High Sparrow snapped his fingers. The crisp sound was like a spell, and Alfred immediately fainted on the sofa. Just in time, 2 farmhands employed by the chicken farm emerged from the workers' basement. They deftly stripped Alfred of his outer clothes and dressed him in a peasant's linen suit. Then, without hesitation, they took away his soul hunter and serpent dagger. Hey, I only promised to return you safely, but I didn't ask you to take your treasures back too. Though these 2 knives are of average quality, they should be worthy of the firebringer. Since I saved your life, I'll accept them. Alfred, unconscious, naturally couldn't offer any resistance. Several large hands quickly applied human skin to his face and smeared it with paint. It was clear this wasn't new to the firebringers, their technique was exceptionally skilled. After the final strokes were completed, the men exchanged a smile. Just then, 3 rhythmic knocks on the door echoed. All 3 frowned. Chapter 418, The Road Home, 6. When Alfred opened his eyes again, the anesthetic had mostly worn off. He flexed his stiff wrists, attempting to remove the black cloth covering his face, when a strong stench of blood reached his nose. He struggled to his feet and looked around. Though his limbs still ached, a deep-seated sense of alarm instantly tensed his nerves. The room had become a blood-red inferno. The fire thief, Big Sparrow, who had presented Alfred with all sorts of scientific knowledge the previous night as an all-seeing prophet, had been hacked in half, his organs and blood spilling onto the floor. Across from him, at least 3 golden scale guards lay sprawled on the ground, their heads pierced. The attacker was a middle-aged woman who had led him into the room from the street. She was known as Big Sparrow's mother. Judging by the corpses scattered throughout the room, most of the golden scale guards who had suddenly appeared were killed by this woman. Unfortunately, 2 fists were no match for 4. Judging from the manner of death, the woman must have been hacked to death by 4 golden scale guards. A long silver broadsword had pierced her back and remained etched on her body even now. 1, 2, 3. Alfred stepped on the thick pool of blood in the room and counted the bodies. High Sparrow and all his men, including 2 thugs impersonating his parents and 2 messengers dressed as workers, were all dead in the room. As for the dead golden scale guards, a full squad, 12 in total. In this bloody battle, both sides fought to the last man. Only he, lying like a corpse on the sofa, had managed to survive the melee. The blood on the ground was still bright red. It hadn't turned red and black, indicating that the battle hadn't lasted long. Kneeling down and caressing their throats, the bodies were still not cold. This sudden battle must have taken place 2 or 3 hours ago. Walking to Brown's mirror, Alfred immediately understood how he had survived the massacre. The fire thieves were truly a professional organization specializing in kidnapping, theft, and human smuggling. The human skin mask perfectly fitted his face, paired with his clothes that faintly reeked of chicken shit. It completely transformed his demeanor, giving him a constant air of harmlessness. Noticing the change in his attire, he instinctively reached for his waist. Sure enough, his customary silver broadsword, Soul Breaker, was gone, along with his serpent dagger tucked into his boot. Alfred knew the High Sparrow must have taken his weapons. They hadn't had time to retreat or relocate, which meant his weapons were still in the house. With careful searching, he could surely find them. Unfortunately, time wasn't his friend. Standing by the windowsill and discreetly parting a corner of the curtain, Alfred saw the street still brightly lit. A team of golden scale guards, Horses pulling a cart of corpses passed by his window. Brothers, remember this. King Edward's order is persecute the firebearers and Vikings throughout the city. Better to kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. We have the power to enter any house and question anyone at will. What the hell are you waiting for? Get some money. Do you want those bastards under Vance to rob those wealthy merchants in West City? The firelight illuminated the faces of the golden scale guards, each flushed, their eyes gleaming with greed. With this order, the city's former guardians were instantly transformed. Every one of them became a looter, a demon succumbing to greed. They abandoned the carts carrying corpses, leaving them to sit in the middle of the street. Then, they carried bag after bag of gold and silver jewelry from above the piles of corpses. A large group of people rushed through the old city, heading straight for the new city where the wealthy merchants and farmers lived, fearing that the innocent merchants would be preempted by others. Human greed knows no bounds. Once you have a gold coin, you'll try to find another one. Once you have a bag, you'll rack your brains to find another. Persecuting citizens? Haha, compared to the weight of gold in your hands, citizens are nothing. Everything is blamed on the Plantagenet's orders anyway. Alfred was more concerned with the bodies on the carriage than the scale guards rushing through the door. Hiding himself in the shadows by the window, he saw that the carriage carrying the bodies contained both civilians and scale guards. Among them were several Vikings wielding axes. At the top of the pile of corpses was the butler, Wentzhoff, with his eyes lashing out and a gaping hole in his upper body. Though he wore the tunic of a French peasant, Alfred recognized his signature white beard. Wentzhoff was dead. The scale guards placed in the same carriage with his body must have also perished at the hands of the Vikings. Looking back, seeing the High Sparrow's eyes, still wide open, Alfred instinctively drew a conclusion. A traitor has emerged from the ranks of the Zoroastrians. The High Sparrow had clearly stated that when the scaled guard launched a city-wide manhunt, he would sacrifice some of the firebearers to ensure the safety of the Vikings. On closer inspection, this plan inherently contained a significant flaw. All firebearers depend on intelligence. Knowing they've been betrayed by their comrades, some will inevitably turn against them. The High Sparrow, seemingly in control, will ultimately pay the price for his arrogance and youth. The dead are gone, but the survivors must strive to survive. The worst-case scenario is likely already happening. Alfred had already prepared himself for the fate of all Vikings and the destruction of Versailles. As the sole survivor, he must return to Normandy alive and bring word to his adoptive father's vassals that Loki has fallen into the hands of the Illuminati. As the High Sparrow had analyzed, this was the only way to save Loki's life. Now he stood alone in a room of blood and corpses. He had lost his weapons, his comrades, his body numb and completely incapacitated. He was not safe. 12 golden scale guards had perished here. Although their greed had driven them to prey on the wealthy and not search the entire city for the time being, accidents could happen at any moment. This was a true dead end. He had to find a way out of this dead end. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419, The Road Home, 7. Lord Famus, I've already told you, there's no future in following that bastard High Sparrow. They, the fire thieves, follow the fire transmitters to make a living. Those charlatans are mysterious every day, and they do life-threatening things. Among the 5 fire kings, our Archbishop Sassas is the more real one. He is the bishop of the Fire Transmitter Temple in Jerusalem. In terms of status, he is the same as Gregory III of your holy church. You also know that in our church, power is directly passed from superiors to subordinates. In this case, it is better to deal with living people. Wouldn't it be better to stand firmly on the side of the Illuminati with Archbishop Sassas? If you want power, we have power. If you want gold, we have gold. Our Firefly Swarm can meet all your requirements. In front of the carriage transporting corpses, a reserve militia was talking in a low voice with a golden scale guard Centurion Famus. As the long night drew to a close and the sky was about to turn pale, 5 of the 7 Vikings who had fled into the city had been apprehended, leaving only the last 2 still hiding in the homes of residents of Versailles Castle. While a golden scale guard Centurion ranked several notches higher than a reserve militiaman, a careful listener to their conversation revealed that this low-key militiaman was the dominant force. Codenamed Mushishi, he was a flame herald long hidden within Paris. Mewtwo, The king of Earthsea was no fool. Having survived 200 million years through 17 civilizations, he had experienced countless vicissitudes in his life. Upon discovering that the Zoroastrians were involved in the Viking rescue effort, he immediately contacted Archbishop Sisas, one of the 5 Cinder Lords, who was inclined to cooperate with the Illuminati. Only spies could effectively combat them. There were 5 Cinder Lords within the Zoroastrians. These 5 individuals, scattered across different continents of Kyushu, jointly operated this secret underground society. Mirror Master Mikra and Fire Thief High Sparrow were all followers of the Fire Lord, the Fire Transmitter. Meanwhile, Musashi and his Firefly Swarm, urgently summoned by Mewtwo, served under the orders of Archbishop Sisas. The entire schism stemmed from the sudden arrival of another group of fire transmitters. By the time Musashi had galloped from Paris to the Château de Versailles, it was nearly midnight. This high sequence chosen one, with his keen sense of smell, harnessed the divine power of his phoenix path, sequence 3 Firefly, to split himself into hundreds of tiny flying insects, silently landing on the city's golden scale guards. Observing from the shadows, he immediately locked onto golden scale guard Centurion Famus. He then appeared before him and engaged him in a friendly conversation. Musashi knew he had to put an end to this disaster before dawn. The quickest way was to find Famus directly, persuade him to defect, and extract from him the details of which fire worshippers had taken the Vikings into their homes. A door-to-door search like the current one would not only consume an enormous amount of time, but would also inevitably cost the lives of many innocent fire worshippers. Musashi was a man with clear self-imposed demands. He lacked the gift of divine intervention like Big Sparrow, so he could only work harder and complete his mission with even greater dedication. Glancing at Famus, he knew he was considering his suggestion. All fire worshippers who defected from the Holy Church were either seeking wealth or power. Those who joined the Zoroastrianism solely out of gratitude or revenge were few and far between. He said nothing more, awaiting Famus's response. He knew he would receive the answer he longed for. Sure enough, just half an hour later, he was standing at the gate of Big Sparrow's abode. Big Sparrow was dead. Musashi's eyes widened in astonishment as he gazed at the 13-year-old boy, whose eyes remained open as he died. As the most prominent young man in the Zoroastrianism in recent years, his name was widely circulated within the church. Within just 2 years of joining the cult, he had become a fire thief, and it was said that he had successfully completed the several missions entrusted to him by the Fire Herald. Unexpectedly, he died in a simple house in Versailles Castle, killed by a few mortal soldiers during a raid. Brother Famus, we're so late. Someone got there first and killed a fire thief before we did. As expected, mortals can't do anything without power. Musashi's profession within the Zoroastrianism was Flame Herald, specifically responsible for relaying orders from Archbishop Sisas, making him a veteran undercover agent roaming the western continent. Through several conversations with the Mirror Master Mikra, he knew that High Sparrow was a self-important spy. In his eyes, resolving problems through force was shameful and devoid of skill. He hoped every action he took would be like a masterpiece of art, capable of achieving a great outcome with minimal effort, navigating a multitude of flowers without getting a single leaf on him. This 13-year-old boy still treated his mission like a game. Unfortunately, even mortals sometimes let their guards down. As a centurion in the city defense, Famus knew the several golden scale guards who had died in the house. They were a group of noble sons who frequently drank and made mistakes. They joined the golden scale guards simply for the sake of formality. The wealthy families behind them had already paved their futures with gold. The High Sparrow's entire plan had been flawless. Knowing Alfred was in his room, Famus had already reported to the other centurions, and he had already searched the entire area. Common sense would dictate that no one would knock on the High Sparrow's door again, except for this group of noble sons, who had clearly been drinking to excess. Such nights, when people could enter and search homes at will, were rare occurrences. These dandies must have been hoping to exploit their parents' financial support to break into the homes of ordinary people and commit atrocities. They paid no heed to the missions assigned by their superiors, knocking on doors impulsively. However, they unexpectedly ran into a tough opponent, the Big Sparrow. When the battle began, the dandies demonstrated their immense strength. For the holy masters, proselytizing could elevate their sequence levels. A wealthy merchant could simply build a few churches and establish a few religious schools, and their chosen ones would reach a minimum of sequence 7. Thus, by some strange coincidence, 12 dandies perished along with a big sparrow and several spies. Are you sure Alfred entered this house? Mushashi crouched down, confirming the circumstances of each individual's death. After closing the door, he unleashed his divine power once again, shattering his body into over 100 fluttering fireflies that flew into the ceiling of the chicken coop, the basement, and even into the neighboring homes, searching for Alfred. Aside from a silver broadsword and an emerald short sword found hidden in a hidden crevice in the ceiling, none of the bodies in the house belonged to the prince from Wessex. I'm familiar with the High Sparrow's sleeper squad, Famous said, frowning as he squatted on the floor. For the third time, he had reached out and stroked the boy's throat. Even now, he found it hard to believe that the powerful fire thief was truly dead. 2 thugs disguised as parents, 2 agents disguised as chicken coop workers, and the High Sparrow himself. That's all the squad had. All 5 of their bodies are here, the remaining 12 were scale guards. This was a standard 12-man squad, and I spotted their centurion, Glass. Only one person was missing from the room. Only Loki's adopted son, Alfred. Chapter 420, The Road Home, 8. Mushashi exploded once again, shattering into over 100 flaming insects. He meticulously searched every inch of the surrounding 10 houses, from courtyards to inner rooms, even basements and attics, where his tiny firefly clones flew in. However, after over an hour of toiling in vain, the 6th escaped Viking and Prince Wessex still hadn't appeared. Upon discovering the entire High Sparrow fire thief team had perished, Golden Scale Guard Centurion Famous quickly realized the situation. To continue his rise in the Zoroastrian Church, he could only rely on Mushashi. Therefore, he immediately defected to Mushashi's side. After carefully comparing the names of the names, Famous discovered that, besides Alfred, the other escaped Viking was none other than the slippery as a loach Archbishop Francis. Alfred's escape was something he could barely tolerate. After all, Prince Wessex had graduated first in his class from the Pantheon of Constantinople as a child, suggesting he must be a gifted individual. Furthermore, his martial prowess and physical prowess were exceptional. Meanwhile, Archbishop Francis, an old man, possessed no martial arts skills and was a lithe, plump man weighing a staggering 180 kilograms. If such a man could escape under their noses, it would be a grave disgrace to the Golden Scale Guard. Famous mounted his steed and swiftly navigated the gates and street corners of Versailles Castle. Without the protection of the High Sparrow and without a suitable weapon, if Alfred were still alive, he would surely seek any means to escape the city. By securing the intersections, he would surely fall into the custody of the Golden Scale Guard. He even specifically obtained Alfred's long-held snake-gut dagger. The Golden Scale Guard's hounds were the finest breeds in the Western continent. Their sense of smell was exceptionally keen. Even 10 days after a single sniff of a prisoner's personal belongings, their memories would remain vivid. After a long ride, all the hounds were familiar with Alfred's scent. The defecting Famous knew that 2 of the High Sparrow's covert team were skilled in disguise. Even if they had altered Alfred's appearance, his scent would still be detectable by the keen sniffing hounds. Over the next 2 days, from the dawn of dawn to a brilliant blaze, and then to the fiery red sunset plunging over the lush green farmland, nearly half of Paris's Golden Scale Guard had been deployed to Versailles. Dozens of heavily armored guards stood guard at every intersection in the small city. Portraits of the old abbot and Alfred hung on every street, not to mention that every one of Versailles' 1,972 households had been searched at least 3 times. Francis and Alfred never appeared. Like 2 ghosts, they had completely melted into the air of Versailles. Hey, old buddy, the big guy's work is done, it's our turn. As the carriage pulled up to the edge of the valley, 2 gaunt figures dropped their whips and reins. They shook their heads vigorously to loosen their stiff neck muscles. At the end of the wetlands outside Versailles lies a crocodile gorge teeming with crocodiles. Nourished by the fertile French soil, the crocodiles in the gorge thrived. Giant crocodiles exceeding 10 meters in length abound, with the smallest reaching 6 meters in length. While ferocious crocodiles often prey on rare and exotic animals, they are still allowed to inhabit the wetlands in large numbers as an essential part of their ecosystem. It's said that the crocodile king has grown to a size resembling an ancient creature, nearly 30 meters in length. The 2 men conversing were mourners driving the carriage, carrying the bodies of the Golden Scale Guard. A large number of Golden Scale Guards poured into Versailles, searching for the escaped Vikings and clearing out the fire-bearers who had aided their escape. When the heavily armed Golden Scale Guard stormed into residents' homes, slaughter was inevitable. The two men's carriages were loaded with nearly 40 bodies, a diverse mix. Among them were golden scale guards slain by Viking axes, members of the fire transmitters beheaded on the spot, and, of course, numerous young civilian girls. Most of these were murdered by the golden scale guards' lustful advances. In the Middle Ages, civilians never experienced justice. On that night of slaughter, when the air was thick with the scent of blood, the clan leader issued the decree: it is better to kill 1,000 by mistake than to let one go. No one would thoroughly investigate whether an ordinary citizen was a member of the fire transmitters. Naturally, there were numerous robberies and abductions of women in the darkness. All the bodies killed during the night were loaded onto the golden scale guards' carriages and transported out of the city at top speed. This served to conceal the crimes of indulging in their lust. It also served to demonstrate to foreign merchants that we were a civilized nation. As for the bodies that appeared that night, naturally, they couldn't be brought to the holy cathedral like ordinary citizens, where a priest would perform a mass and bury them with a cross. The golden scale guards had no way of explaining the deaths of so many wealthy merchants and young women. Their bodies were destined for the crocodile gorge and dumped into the crocodiles' mouths. Come on, old man, let's see what these bigwigs have left for us. Hey, it's so dark in the middle of the night. I hope you impatient soldiers can spare us a few copper coins. The two undertakers were already quite old. They took on the shady job of dumping corpses in Crocodile Gorge several times a year. Before dumping the bodies in the gorge, they routinely loaded them. Heavy purses, jeweled jewelry, and rings were out of the question for now. The golden scale guards had already stripped the bodies of their most valuable trophies. All that remained for the undertakers were their tattered armor and the few scattered copper coins that might have lingered in their pockets. Haha. Today is my lucky day. The white-bearded old man pulled out 2 gleaming silver coins and raised them to the sky. 2 imperial flower silver coins. You don't find these every day. Hey. You're really lucky today, old man. His companion on the other side reached out his withered hands and grabbed a large corpse. Look at this bastard's belly. How come it's still so round even after death? 2 large, iron-like hands gripped the corpse's ankles tightly. The old man was about to use his strength to pull him off the carriage when the previously stiff feet in his hands suddenly jumped violently. This. As he stared in astonishment, a large figure nimbly turned over and sat upright among the pile of corpses in the carriage. The old man slumped to the ground in horror. Fuck, I told you. Corpses that haven't had mass performed by a priest are prone to rebirth. Brother, let's run. The 2 old men didn't bother to continue collecting the spoils. They turned around and just wanted to escape. Another corpse had already stepped on the breeze and appeared in front of them. Chapter 421, The Road Home, 9. They were none other than Alfred and Francis, the long-lost men of Versailles Castle. On that night, the air thick with the scent of blood, Alfred knew he couldn't remain within the city limits for long. As he slipped out of the High Sparrow's chicken coop and approached the corpse-carrying carriage, searching for a weapon, a sturdy hand suddenly pulled him inside. A closer look revealed Archbishop Francis, hidden beneath the body of Venzoff. Your Highness, do not move, the entire city is under martial law. Walking around will only lead to capture. Hiding among the corpses like me offers a glimmer of hope. The old Archbishop casually pulled a bloody mass of internal organs from a nearby corpse's wound and threw it at Alfred. Master Francis, how did you recognize me after my appearance? Haha, with the whole city under martial law. What civilian would choose to go out on the streets at this time, except for a few of us desperate ghosts? Stop talking, they'll be back soon. These were the last words uttered by the old patriarch and Alfred. As the bodies piled up on top of them, Alfred understood. Without his weapon and with the effects of the anesthetic still lingering, his fighting power was almost zero. Disguising himself as a corpse on the corpse cart was indeed their best chance of escape. They remained silent and feigning death in the car for almost 2 days. During these 2 days, Alfred endured hunger, thirst, and the increasingly strong stench of corpses. The 2 elderly drivers were no match for him in terms of fighting power. However, they traveled along the official road. If other merchants saw him committing murder, Alfred would inevitably fall into the hands of the patriarch. Only now, reaching the edge of Crocodile Canyon, just as they were about to be pushed into the gorge, did they finally crawl out from the pile of corpses. After 2 days, the effects of the anesthetic had completely worn off. Using divine power to control the wind, he grabbed 2 mourners, 1 in each hand. A moment later, 2 long screams echoed from Crocodile Canyon. At the top of the gorge, only Alfred and Archbishop Francis remained. "Master Francis, what's the next plan?" The old archbishop didn't answer him, but instead opened the packages the two mourners had brought with them. Perhaps due to the elderly's slow metabolism, the two men had no food with them. The packages contained only small change, a letter of association signed by a golden scale guard, and 2 flints for making wildfires. Alfred, after 2 days of starvation, felt dizzy. But the predicament didn't faze him. He grabbed the corpse of a 2-meter-tall golden scale guard and twisted it hard, removing the thigh. After 2 days of stagnation, the corpse had begun to rot slightly. Reaching out to tear the rotting flesh from the broken leg, he found a large rock and smashed it hard, breaking the leg bone at the base and creating a sharp spike. Then, he picked up the bone knife and looked at the fat crocodile in the canyon. Just over 10 minutes later, Alfred climbed out of the canyon bottom, carrying a thick short crocodile leg. Father Francis lit a campfire, and the two of them ate some barbecue to fill their stomachs, then found a puddle to wash away the stench of corpses. When night fell, they hung their wet clothes by the campfire to dry. Like wandering ghosts, the two finally experienced a feeling of being alive again. "Father Francis, what should we do next?" Staring intently at the burning campfire, the old father did not answer for a long time. His mind was working rapidly, integrating all the information he knew. "The fire priest Abijah and I are as close as brothers. He would never harm me." The entire transaction was conducted under his coordination. I produced the imperial seal, and the fire bishop stationed in Paris appeared. Given the professionalism of the Zoroastrians, they won't go back on their word on this matter. Otherwise, if this gets out, it'll be like smearing shit on their face. Never again will the Zoroastrians receive any valuable artifacts. Then the question becomes, who betrayed us? In the eyes of the High Sparrow, Father Francis was far less important than Alfred. Therefore, when he entered the bar to drink, his glass was not drugged. He walked all the way to the old town, where the common people gathered. The fire bishops who received him were a group of hired carriages and laborers, specializing in the post workers who ran the route from Versailles to the English Channel. The old father was an expert at making a living by talking. He knew no martial arts. Forget humans, he'd never even killed a chicken in his life. His deep-seated sense of danger prevented him from hiding in the postmaster's house, instead taking refuge in an unused freight wagon in the stables. The dry, splintered wood of the wagon wasn't comfortable to sleep on, but in a strange and dangerous city, it provided a necessary cushion. It was precisely this sense of vigilance that allowed him to slip out a back door and escape when the golden scale guards kicked down the door and burst in. After a long moment of reflection, the old patriarch slapped his cheek and first produced a shrunken purse. "Your Highness, we currently have 3 broom leaves, 7 imperial silver coins, and 27 copper leaves. This is all the gold and silver we've looted from these corpses. I'm truly sorry, but I can't give you a cent of this. Duke Loki is still in Paris, and our hiding place has been compromised. My intuition tells me there's a traitor within the Zoroastrian Church. I need to return to Paris and personally find the fire bishop to inquire about all this." As he spoke these words, the old abbot could feel his heart pounding and his lips trembling slightly. He seemed to be back in his hiding place atop a tree, gazing out over Lindisfarne Abbey. He knew climbing into the monastery through the secret passage would be dangerous, but he also knew that if he could gain entry, he would surely reap significant rewards. It was the same now. What others saw as a crisis, Francis saw as a rare opportunity. What Duke Loki needed most at this moment was an ally. If the Zoroastrians truly fell apart, and if he could win Mikra over to his side, it would be a major step forward for the Vikings. The Zoroastrians had long harbored a faint hostility towards Loki. All the firebenders at the Firebender Shrine at Storm's End vanished en masse without a single violation, though they lacked clear evidence linking them to Loki. But the weight of this cauldron hung heavy over his head. It was undeniable that these intelligence agents provided a powerful backing for the Arab Empire's triumph with the Tang dynasty and the Byzantine Empire. No one would refuse such allies. A Viking with a straightforward mind, only capable of wielding an axe, was simply not suited to underground work. If anyone was needed, it could only be him. He had firmly committed himself to Loki's cause. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would find a way to rescue him. Chapter 422, The Road Home, 10. Alfred knew the danger Francis faced by returning alone to the tiger's den. Although he had a note worth 100,000 silver coins, it could only be used after being exchanged for silver coins at the Paris Chamber of Commerce Bank. Remember, just 2 days earlier, the Chamber's president, Diamond Flower Durand, had been slain by Alfred's sword. Even lingering on the streets of Paris at that moment was utterly dangerous, let alone entering the Chamber of Commerce Bank. Therefore, when Francis demanded everything they possessed, 2 horses, the carriage carrying the body, all the gold and silver, and the document signed by the Golden Scale Guard, Alfred gave it all to him without hesitation. When disaster strikes, teammates who don't flee but instead fight tooth and nail for a chance to turn the tide are priceless. The old patriarch was a precious blessing bestowed upon the Vikings by the gods. The 2 men slept for a few hours around the campfire to recuperate. As the sky began to pale, before the sun fully rose, Francis had already dressed in mourning clothes and driven the carriage away. Although unarmed and penniless, Alfred showed no sign of panic. People are shaped by the trials of life. A year of living among the Vikings had transformed him from a pampered young man into a warrior capable of adapting to any situation. After stomping out a campfire, Alfred looked toward the rising sun, pointing north, and already plotting his route. Paris wasn't far from the English Channel, less than 100 kilometers as the crow flies. A slow, steady march on horseback would take 2 days. However, by sailing downstream, carried by the surging current, the estuary could be reached in less than a day. This is what Alfred did. First, he climbed back into the ravine and, using his bone knife, stabbed and hacked the skin off the crocodile from yesterday's crocodile, carrying it across his shoulders. Alfred inherited his skinning skills from the Slavic king, Quackenbush. During the months of hunting in Asgard, he followed Quackenbush closely, mastering nearly every aspect of his hunting skills. The 7 divine realms offered countless treacherous prey. By comparison, peeling a crocodile skin intact was no challenge at all. Next, he carried the skin to the Seine River, not far from the Crocodile Canyon. No one would refuse a lone traveler carrying a precious crocodile skin, especially when Alfred, speaking broken English, offered to sell it exclusively to the ferry owner at half price. He was immediately invited aboard the ferry. The French ferry owner, having made a small fortune, even provided him with a new set of clothes and a meal. After being disguised by the fire transmission gang, Alfred exuded a harmless edge. Furthermore, being English and speaking fluent English, he was a far cry from the Vikings wanted by the Golden Scale Guard. As night fell again, the surging river had already brought the ferry to the dock near the English Channel. Numerous ferry boats gathered there. Alfred, fingering 2 French gold coins inscribed with gorse leaf, approached the French shipowner again. "Gentle sir, the weather has been getting cold these past few days. Could I exchange a gold leaf for this magnificent fox fur robe you're wearing?" The French shipowner rubbed his ears and asked 3 times before confirming the Englishman's meaning. The gorse leaf, the gold coin used in France, held immense purchasing power. This young man, carrying a complete crocodile skin by the river, had first bought him a fine crocodile skin for half the price. To the shipowner, it was like picking up 5 gold leaves for nothing, and then offered another gold leaf for his own fox fur robe, which he'd worn for 10 years. 10 more gold leaves would be enough for this fool. The barge docked at the port and began unloading. Alfred, wearing his fox fur robe, disembarked contentedly. Outside the dock, he saw the harbor overflowing with Golden Scale Guards. They were leashing huge black hounds, carefully examining the merchants about to embark. With a faint smile, Alfred knew he had guessed correctly again. He casually walked into the queue waiting to board the ship and gently patted the elderly man before him. "Respected sir, it's cold, and seeing you dressed so lightly is a pity. Let me drape this fox fur robe over you." He took it off and gently placed it on the elderly man's shoulders. The elderly Frenchman couldn't understand Alfred's English. But when the young man, with his bright smile, draped a coat over him, he instinctively wanted to express his gratitude. Turning back, he found the young man had vanished without a trace. "Son, did you see that young man behind me?" the elderly man asked the young Englishman standing behind him, waiting to board the ship with his wife. However, the newlywed was clearly still lost in the sweet memories of his wife's trip to France, oblivious to the person before him. "Ah, my age has made my eyes blurry," the old man muttered. "Did I just hallucinate?" But there was a fox fur robe of excellent quality on him, that was real. The group preparing to board the ship continued to move forward. Finally, when the old man stood before the Golden Scale Guard, the guard's hound immediately became agitated. It barked loudly at the old man, then bit hard at his coat, trying to force it off him. "Hail Mary, what on earth is going on?" The collapsed old man cried out before the golden scale guard tackled him to the ground. The real culprit has appeared. Brothers, pin him down. The golden scale guard's eyes gleamed with excitement. The French Merchants' Union had offered an unimaginably high price for Alfred's head. He could almost hear the crisp sound of gold coins falling from the sky. Alfred graduated first in the Pantheon. His strength is truly formidable. Everyone, gather around. Hold his hands firmly. The elderly man didn't even have a chance to explain before he was pinned down by a group of burly golden scale guards. Sir, how could I possibly be the Prince of Wessex? I'd damn well like to regain my youth, but do I have the ability? Bullshit, you've had the help of those Zoroastrian demons. They must have put a human skin mask on you. Brothers, peel off his skin and reveal his true form. 4 or 5 large hands frantically groped the old man's face, trying to find the seams of the mask. This made it even more difficult for the already delirious man to speak. The young man behind me gave me this dress, he uttered with difficulty. The leading golden scale guard captain suddenly turned and fixed his small eyes on the newlyweds standing behind him. Hey, so that's what's going on. Prince Alfred, let's see where you can get this time. Brothers, cuff him. Captain, which one are you talking about? Fuck. No need to ask. Everyone at the dock. The once orderly harbor suddenly turned to chaos. In an unnoticed corner, Alfred had already activated his psychic powers. Unleashing the power of a hurricane berserker, he leaped on the breeze, leaping 10 meters directly onto the departing ferry. Clinging to the ship's hull, he slipped through the porthole into the cargo hold. Inside, neatly stacked barrels of rum, spices, cloth, and Byzantine glassware, Alfred found a barrel of rum, flipped the lid off, and plopped into it. Knowing the power of the French hounds, he left no footprints on the floor after entering the ship. This farce on the dock wasn't going to end anytime soon. If by any chance the golden scale guard led hounds to search the ship, only this strong-smelling rum could cover up his scent. Chapter 423, The Road Home, 11. The English Channel is only 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Under normal circumstances, even a fully loaded, slow-moving cargo ship could reach the other side in under 2 hours. When the Golden Scale Guard searched the citizens on the shore to no avail, they boarded every ship at the dock and conducted 2 more thorough searches. After a long time, the ship finally set sail. Alfred climbed out of the wine barrel. Ignoring the reek of alcohol, he hunkered down by the window, waiting for land to appear. He was ready to jump ship and escape at any moment. Across the English Channel lay his homeland, Wessex, but was it safe now? Not necessarily. Having been born and raised in this country, Alfred knew the close ties between Wessex and the Duchy of France. Over 100 years ago, his great-grandfather, Cadwalla, had been conducting ties with the Duchy of France as a vassal. The dragon eggs, dragon-rearing methods, and dragon speakers who could communicate with dragons in the Kingdom of Wessex all came from the Duchy of France. 60% of the goods sold by Wessex merchants came from the vast kingdom across the Channel. It could be said that the Duchy of France provided significant support for their current position in the English Isles. Furthermore, the dramatic trial of his adoptive father, Loki, was beyond humiliating. His actions were akin to riding the coattails of the Plantagenets. Chief Justice Ethan von Klein and Chamber of Commerce President Diamond Flower Durand were both slain by their own swords, and nearly 100 nobles and officers present in court perished at the hands of the Vikings. Given Alfred's knowledge of the French royal family, they had already launched a new round of trade sanctions against the 7 kingdoms of England. At this juncture, Egbert would not refuse any of their demands. The Golden Scale Guards would undoubtedly know that he was fleeing towards Wessex, and therefore, they would likely focus their surveillance on key points in Wessex. Although Wessex was his homeland, the proud French Golden Scale Guards knew that if they captured him, they would have no need to report to the Wessex royal family. Even this time, they were sending a large army, most likely under the guise of eliminating the Vikings. If Alfred fell into the hands of the Golden Scale Guard, he would have no hope of receiving any assistance from Wessex. When the endless coastline finally appeared on the horizon, Alfred didn't hesitate. He leaped from the ship's porthole and plunged directly into the icy waters. Compared to the Vikings, his swimming skills were far from excellent. Furthermore, he couldn't move towards the docks. He had to make a sharp detour and find a deserted, rocky area to land on for maximum safety. Don't forget, his enemies weren't limited to the Golden Scale Guard. Among the splintered members of the Firebenders was another group of outcasts who obeyed the master. It was this group that revealed their shelter in Versailles Castle, nearly wiping out the Vikings in the city. After swimming through the sea for over an hour and consuming several gulps of seawater, Alfred finally climbed onto a rocky shore. After briefly resting on the hard rocks to recover his strength, he climbed the cliffs and found a cave, where he ate some fruit and dried meat scavenged from the cargo ship. The desolate coastline seemed deserted, but he couldn't stay there for long. Ever since the Viking invasions began drifting down from the North Sea, even after Loki occupied 2 provinces and established his own Viking settlement, Egbert dared not relax his patrols of the coastline. He tripled the patrol force, with each squadron of 200 cavalrymen patrolling the Wessex coastline almost day and night. Alfred didn't believe that falling into the hands of the Wessex patrols would improve his situation. The Golden Scale Guard might use any seemingly friendly excuse to abduct him from Wessex. As for his biological father, Egbert, he had no right to speak before the French. I've come this far, and even successfully escaped from the French duchy. Even if I rely entirely on my own 2 feet, I'm now less than 5 days away from Stone Forest County. There's no one within Wessex's borders I can trust. For these 5 days, it's safest to hide among the common people. After all, returning alive and delivering news is more important than anything else. Stomping out a campfire, Alfred slept for the night in a dark seaside cave. The next day, before dawn, he climbed the cliffs and, following the direction of the setting moon, identified his path home for the next 5 days. Alfred once again embarked on his hunting adventure. His successful escape from this hellish escape was largely due to the hunting and survival skills taught to him by Butch and Bush. During this long journey, the unarmed 15-year-old boy managed to survive through the dense forest by scavenging branches, bones, and stones. Not to mention the constant need to dodge patrols from the Wessex army and militia. Hiding by day and traveling by night, he traveled under the stars and moon. Finally, on the 4th night, he arrived at the outskirts of Hohenheim, in the province of Green Valley. A full year had passed, and the once thriving Hohenheim lay in ruins. Under the combined assault of burrowing worms and the Cyclops, the city had completely collapsed. Ever since the ice melted and spring arrived, Egbert had been hiring farmhands to clear the wreckage. The work had lasted for 2 months, with no sign of completion. Countless migrant workers passed through the ruins daily, and recently, thousands of Golden Scale Guards had arrived. The Overlord understood that this important town near the Wessex border was his last line of defense in his pursuit of Alfred. If he were to escape Hohenheim, Stonewood County would be behind him. Now, it was Viking territory. Alfred, hidden in the treetops 100 meters from the city, had spent a full day observing the movements of the migrant workers and the Golden Scale Guards. They formed 5 shifts, patrolling the official road day and night. For the entire day, fewer than 10 caravans crossed the cordon they had set up. All merchants attempting to cross the border were subjected to meticulous and comprehensive inspections. Simply relying on disguise to get through was simply unrealistic. The complex terrain of Stone Forest County dictated that there was only one way from Wessex to the Rainfall Highlands. Towering stalagmites lay beneath the bottomless abyss. Even with Alfred's skills, it would have been impossible to climb from the bottom of the slippery cliffs. Alfred sighed softly. Odin loved killing. These last few hundred meters might only be traversed by force. Chapter 424, The Road Home, 12. After slinking down from the tree, Alfred's first stop was the temporary sheds housing the farmhands. These sheds were where the workers slept at night, rarely occupied during the day. He entered and wandered through one simple shed after another. His ultimate destination was the overseer's tent at the far end of the camp. Although the Wessex farmhands were paid for their work, overseers still existed to oversee the work. Alfred chose to enter their sheds because only the overseer's quarters were likely to contain spare swords. His first task was to obtain a weapon. However, having survived so far, Alfred's luck seemed to have run out. Reaching out to pull aside the curtain of the first tent, he wondered, fuck. Are these Frenchmen really as formidable as the legends say? A sudden silence fell within the tent. The woman looked at Alfred in horror. Alfred could see her Adam's apple vibrating rapidly, a sign of the shrill roar she was about to unleash. Deciding decisively, he yanked out the scale guard sword and stabbed him in the back, pinning both of them to death within the tent. The guard and the woman fell to the ground, dead. Alfred could feel his heart pounding. Luckily, the woman hadn't uttered that shrill cry. This time, it was truly close. The broadswords wielded by the scale guards were forged using the finest techniques of the Arab Empire. This steel, known as Damascus steel, was the most powerful weapon gold could buy. Stepping over the two bodies, Alfred drew his broadsword and gently wiped it dry. After searching the room, he found the uniform of the Wessex overseer and changed out of his dirty clothes. His inability to speak French was a major drawback. He dared not wear the scale guard's clothing. To blend in with the crowd, he had to dress like an Englishman. With all preparations in place, he gently parted the curtains and prepared to flee, only to be met head-on by 3 more scale guards. "Vance, you bastard, you're finally done. Get out of the way. It's my turn, I'm telling you, this chick is the most delicious of the English. Today, I'll show you some." Just as his companion finished introducing the women in the tent, the golden scale guard turned and saw Alfred, who had just opened the door curtain. Both sides froze in silence. The handsome golden scale guard, noticing Alfred's overseer uniform, mistook him for the woman's husband, back to catch them in an affair. He smiled awkwardly and was about to say something to lighten the mood when the hound he was holding suddenly barked furiously. The unprovoked hound's rage had already irritated the golden scale guard, but now, seeing the dead golden scale guard sprawled on the mat in the room, and the pool of blood, even if he was slow to react, he understood what was happening. "Fuck, brothers, draw your swords. This man, he's Alfred." As soon as he had shouted, a flash of white sword light pierced his mouth and shot out from the back of his head. A sudden burst of crimson blood jolted the guards back to reality from their slacking off. Frantically trying to draw their swords, Alfred's attacks were already slashing down 2 more guards simultaneously. The broadsword pierced through the armor, resounding with a clash of metal. The sudden howls echoed through the camp, prompting more and more guards to emerge from their tents. Most were disheveled, but their numbers numbered close to several hundred. Farm laborers employed by the Wessex royal family were not allowed to bring companions into the sheds. However, the overseers had no such concerns. Some large-scale projects could last for months or even a year, and most overseers would bring their wives to live with them. While the overseers were out on duty during the day, their wives could stay in the tents to wash clothes and cook. Alfred had never expected French soldiers to be so popular with the women of Wessex. But on reflection, it made sense. They ate the royal rations of the Plantagenet family, and most of them had plenty of money. Furthermore, their gleaming golden scale mail, Damascus broadswords, and French tall horses made them look far more impressive than the Wessex army. Not to mention, these men spoke French. In the Dark Ages, this was reserved for the nobility. It seemed as if these men were inherently superior to the English-speaking English. Almost no woman would refuse their offer of entertainment. The previously peaceful overseer's camp was like playing whack-a-mole, when suddenly so many scale guards appeared. Alfred, horrified and enraged, could only flee. The scale guards, however, rushed from their rooms in excitement. Most didn't even have time to don their armor. Bare-chested, broadswords in hand, they leaped onto their horses, ready to surround and kill Alfred. His head was truly too valuable. Edward Plantagenet's price for Alfred's capture was 100,000 gold coins, a castle, and 10,000 inhabitants. This was a fortune that countless French families might struggle to amass in 10 generations. To describe it as a leap to heaven wouldn't be an exaggeration. As Alfred galloped out of the camp, he was immediately followed by over 50 scale guards, who had previously been enjoying the women of Wessex. It was clear that more were trying to join the pursuit. Turning directly north, this route seemed the shortest, but it was fundamentally unacceptable. It meant Alfred would be alone against a massive scale guard array directly ahead. He would be intercepted from front and back, and pursued from behind. Even if he faced 1,000 pigs, he would fight to the death. The scale guard's defensive capabilities were completely different from those of the English mercenaries. They wore full suits of scale armor. Against such armor, Loki's most effective weapon was his signature two-handed axe. When his weapons weren't heavy enough, he could only rely on the strength inherent in his muscles. Given his understanding of his abilities, without Soul Breaker and Serpent Gut Sword, if he could kill 3 or 5 scale guards in a tangle with them, it would be considered a remarkable feat. In battle, brains were as important as the sword. When survival became paramount, Alfred chose not to fight. He turned south, galloping towards the heart of Wessex. A vast army of golden scale guards, their horses in tow, followed him. In the end, all of them were mobilized, joining in this grand hunt. They lost sight of Alfred. It was 100,000 gold coins and a castle that were galloping. Chapter 425, The Road Home, 13. After running for nearly an hour, Alfred quickly demonstrated his superiority. Wessex was his homeland. Compared to the Golden Scale Guards, he knew every inch of the land. From the mountains and rivers to the small paths opened by merchants to save time, he knew them all. In contrast, the Golden Scale Guards could only passively follow him. For a while, they could keep up with him. But as the run lengthened, Alfred, clad in light cloth, began to quickly outpace them. It took him a full hour, a vast circle, to return to the border near Stoneham. This kid didn't even choose to run back to his father, but still tried to return to Normandy. Fuck, we've been fooled, don't worry, we trust our brothers stationed on the line. These English fools will help us capture their prince. Remember, he's still a wanted criminal. He still has the human skin mask on his face. The Golden Scale Guards were right. Every Wessex citizen knew the importance of their French allies. In the medieval era, when marriage was relatively weak, even knowing these powerful figures had repeatedly cheated on them, the Wessex people, naturally inferior to their opponents, chose not to tear their ties and make a big fuss. For one thing, they were paid. And for another, the Vikings had already landed on the English Isles. If the French duchy turned its back on Wessex, they would lose their former glory as the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Brothers, the wanted criminal is coming our way again. Form a human wall and let's block his advance for our ally. The foreman had already lined up at the end of the official road. The stone bridge leading to Schillen County, which was only 30 meters wide, was crowded with hundreds of figures. They were holding simple weapons, but they had the advantage of numbers. When Alfred came running, he knew that he had to make a choice again. Is to reveal his true identity to the Wessex farmers and workers, or continue to escape for his life? After just 3 minutes of thinking, Alfred took the reins and stood on the horse. The horse ran towards the human wall at a high speed, and just before it was about to join the human wall, he jumped up. The divine power of the hurricane berserker in his body was activated, and the strong wind lifted his back, allowing him to step on the hoods of the crowd and run all the way. A moment later, he had passed everyone and boarded the stone bridge leading to Schillen County. On the other side of the bridge is Schillen County, the land of the Vikings. Without his horse, Alfred could only run on his own 2 legs. The power of the hurricane berserker allowed him to burst forth at speeds comparable to a galloping horse for brief moments. However, the power generated by this burning psychic energy was ultimately short-lived. Even after crossing the stone bridge and officially stepping onto the first stalagmite in Stone Forest County, he could not let his guard down. Looking around, he saw no Viking patrols at the bottom of the stone bridge. The pursuing Golden Scale Guards halted. True, Alfred's head was worth a fortune, but they needed lives to spend it. Though the Vikings were small in number, the entire western continent had witnessed their madness. The title Golden Scale Guard was essentially a glittering golden rice bowl. Even without the bounty, they could still live well. The elderly, with families to support, almost all stopped. Only a few dozen young men, unburdened by worries, chose to brave the odds and press forward. These 50-odd riders would ultimately determine Alfred's fate. On the stone bridge, he ran with all his might towards the first stalagmite. The towering stone bridge, built centuries ago by Celtic druids harnessing the power of nature, connected Stone Forest County to the Green Valley where Stoneham Fortress lay. At the end of the Green Valley lay a cliff, and beneath the bridge lay a chasm. As the force of the raging wind gradually faded, Alfred, still running, had lost all means of escape. He could only mechanically move towards the first stalagmite. Behind him, he could hear the crisp clatter of horses' hooves as his pursuers approached. The distance between him and the night, already short, was rapidly closing. Alfred's hurricane berserker path had only reached sequence 7. He still had many untapped abilities, and the psychic energy stored in his bloodline was extremely limited. Days of exposure to the elements had already left him in poor condition, and the continuous running was now on the verge of exhaustion. Squeezing the last ounce of psychic energy from his bloodline, he managed to muster a small amount of gusts of wind. Just as the Golden Scale Guard was about to close in, he forced himself to distance himself. Using his last bit of strength, he barely crossed the stone bridge and reached the first stalagmite in Stone Forest County. Alfred was almost completely exhausted at this time. He staggered onto the platform and shouted loudly, but no Viking patrolman appeared beside him. The crisp sound of horse hooves rang out again, and he knew that he had no way to escape. The galloping cavalry immediately surrounded him. The young man with a sword felt that he was surrounded by enemies in front, behind, and on both sides. He looked towards the direction of the falling rain highlands. He was only a few dozen kilometers away from the finish line, but this last section of the road was like a natural moat. He could no longer break through the iron wall in front of him. Come on. We are all sinners living in a filthy world, but even so, someone still has to look up at the sky. The golden scale guards surrounded him, but did not immediately draw their weapons. The first weapon that flew towards him was a long lasso. Alfred blocked it with his broadsword, but the broadsword in his hand was immediately entangled in the chain. Seeing that he had lost his weapon, a man holding a sledgehammer behind him immediately smashed the sledgehammer into the back of his head. With no room to dodge, Alfred could only abandon his weapon. He swayed left and right, looking for a flaw in the encirclement, but the dense crowd did not leave him any room. Brothers, don't hurt him. Mr. Howells, the acting president of the Paris Chamber of Commerce, has spoken. This man is the executioner who killed Mr. Durand, Chief Justice Ethan, and 72 nobles in the Inquisition. If we can capture him alive, they are willing to pay 3 times the price. Haha. Alfred wiped the blood from his face fiercely. Giving up? There is no way I'm going to give up. Even if I have to use my fists, I will fight you to the last moment. Alfred leaped for the last time. Facing the dazzling sun, he stretched out his hand and clenched his fist to hit the golden scale guard in front of him. He could feel the cold and hard texture of the iron mask when his fist touched it. Flesh cannot fight against steel. However, no one expected that Alfred's symbolic resistance would actually knock the golden scale guard on horseback away with one punch. He looked at the struggling knight on the ground in astonishment. It was not until this moment that he discovered that a steel spear had pierced the chest of the golden scale guard at the same time as his fist fell. Looking back, one figure after another appeared on the top of the towering stalagmite. Among them, a heroic woman jumped into the air, facing the afterglow of the setting sun, and descended from the sky like a valkyrie. Katya, the garrison captain of the Rainy Highlands, the Flying Wind Guard, finally rode up when Alfred was in despair. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.